Chapter 65. Shun Yu looked at Shang Junlin speechlessly. Why are you looking at me like that? Shang Junlin's hands moved unhurriedly. Did I say something wrong? No. Shun Yu had a headache when he thought of the two experiences. He didn't dislike being intimate with Shang Junlin, but Shang Junlin had been with him for too long. Shun Yu felt that he couldn't take it anymore. Forget it. The carriage swayed as it entered the palace. Eunuch Meng, who had been waiting for a long time, greeted him as soon as he got off the carriage. Your Majesty, Official Fang requests an audience. Let him wait for me in the imperial study. Shang Junlin left after sending Shun Yu back to Yuzhong Palace. Official Fang had come to the palace this time for his troublesome daughter. Your Majesty, I am ashamed. I didn't know that my daughter had disguised herself as a man to participate in the imperial examinations. Official Fang knelt on the ground, his face full of regret. He knew that his daughter had great ambitions, but he didn't expect that she would really put them into action. If he had known, he wouldn't have taught her so many things since she was young and made her ambitious. Shang Junlin had an impression of this woman. He threw the booklet in his hand aside and said, Tell me, what happened? My daughter kept the news a secret until the results came out. She knew that she couldn't hide it anymore, so she told me. Official Fang was shocked by his daughter. He didn't have time to be surprised that his daughter had obtained excellent grades in high school. He asked her to tell him the story in detail. It turns out that before the new year, when she went to visit her childhood teacher, she somehow got a man's identity and participated in the local provincial examination. After she passed, she didn't tell anyone and kept it a secret. This time, she used the same trick and entered the examination hall with that fake identity again. The final court examination was to enter the palace to meet the emperor. Fang Jiari had told Shang Junlin in advance, so she was confident. That was why she dared to tell Official Fang the truth after the results were released. Official Fang rambled on for a long time. When he finished, he kowtowed heavily and said, It's my fault for not teaching my daughter well. I am willing to accept the punishment. Is there a rule in Dahuan that states that women can't participate in the imperial examinations? Shang Junlin suddenly asked. No. Lord Fang didn't understand why Shang Junlin would suddenly ask such a question. He thought carefully about the laws of the Great Huan dynasty and realized that there wasn't any rule that prohibited women from participating in the imperial examinations. It was just that after so many years, everyone had subconsciously thought that only men could participate. Realizing the meaning behind Shang Junlin's words, Lord Fang's eyes slowly widened. But there has never been such a precedent. His Majesty actually wants to use female officials? Master Fang couldn't believe his eyes. There's no need to rush. Let's wait for the results of the court examination. Lord Fang returned home in a daze. Lady Fang anxiously greeted him. How is it? She was also shocked by what her daughter had done. Ever since Lord Fang entered the palace, he had been feeling uneasy. One had to know that deceiving the monarch was a crime punishable by the extermination of 9 generations of the clan. Not to mention that Fang Jiari had participated in the imperial examinations as a woman. It would have been fine if she had not passed the examinations, but she had passed the examinations and even achieved good results. Master Fang patted Madame Fang's hand. Let's talk inside. In the study, Lord Fang dismissed the servants, leaving only his wife and Fang Jiari. He slowly said, His Majesty doesn't intend to pursue Jiari's matter. Madame Fang stood up from her seat in shock. How is that possible? Why not? Compared to the anxious Lord Fang and Madame Fang, Fang Jiari was in a much better mood. I told you that His Majesty is different from other emperors. I told you not to worry. How can we not worry about this? Lord Fang was furious at the mention of her name. Look at what you've done. Our family was almost ruined because of you. Father, am I such a careless person in your eyes? Fang Jiari sighed. Since His Majesty and Lord Fang had revealed the truth, there was no need for her to hide it. She told them everything that had happened after the incident with Prince Yu. I told you not to worry. You didn't believe me no matter what I said. Lord Fang let out a long breath. You mean, you told His Majesty about this in advance? Lord Fang's voice unconsciously rose as he spoke. Fang Jieri nodded. I saw His Majesty and His Majesty at that time. Just as you said, they were a perfect match. Who asked you this? Lord Fang almost choked. Why didn't you discuss it with me before you made a decision? If His Majesty had listened to you and thought you were being whimsical, what would you have done? There are no ifs. Fang Jieri retorted. There would only be one result. Otherwise, she wouldn't have had the chance to see His Majesty and His Majesty. Forget it. You've had your own ideas since you were young. Since you've made a choice, do it well. Don't let His Majesty down. Lord Fang waved his hand. What else could he say? Father, please don't worry. I won't go against my original intention. Madame Fang wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. Why did you choose such a path? Just thinking about it made Madame Fang's heart ache. How much doubt would a woman receive from the outside world if she became an official? Her daughter grew up pampered and spoiled. Before she could choose a husband for her and watch her get married and have children, she had to watch her daughter run headlong into the power field. Fang Jieri came over and hugged her mother. Mother, don't worry about me. With His Majesty and His Majesty as my backing, I'll be fine. Just comfort me. You're just like your father. You always make people worry. At that time, Lord Fang was just a 7th-rank official who had just entered the officialdom. The other princes were powerful and influential. He chose Shang Junlin, who was the least favored, because Shang Junlin drove away the foreign enemies and recovered the country. At that time, Fang Jun knelt in front of me and only said one sentence, I'm loyal to Da Huan and also to the person who can save Da Huan. Shang Junlin refuted the opinions in the memorial and talked about what happened at that time. At that time, I was in a very difficult situation in the imperial court. Several princes were fighting to the death. Almost all the forces in the capital were involved. I led the army outside all year round and didn't have any help in the imperial court. It was Fang Jun who gathered the forces little by little so that I wasn't in the dark in the imperial court. His Majesty was willing to give Miss Fang a chance because of Lord Fang. Shun Yu poured a cup of tea and put it in front of Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin picked up the teacup and took a sip. There's one reason. There's another reason. Although she's a woman, I saw the shadow of Fang Jun in Fang Jieri. He taught his daughter very well. I really want to see how far Fang Jieri can go as a woman. Your Majesty won't misjudge people. At that time, Shun Yu saw the conviction in Fang Jieri's eyes. In the short time they spent together, Shun Yu could also feel that Fang Jieri was a determined person. She had the gentleness of a woman and a heart that didn't lose to any man. The more they spent time together, the more Shun Yu couldn't figure out how the Prince of Yu defeated Shang Junlin in his previous life. Whether it was in terms of intelligence or other aspects, the Prince of Yu was no match for the latter. What was the origin of the book he read after his death? Who was the one who manipulated them? The development of this life was very different from his previous life. Shun Yu didn't know if they were out of control, but he would never allow the ending of his previous life to happen again. In the book, the Prince of Yu was crowned emperor. Shun Qingran was the mother of the world. However, Shun Yu destroyed the Prince of Yu's dream before his death and changed the ending of the book. It was clear that everything in the book could be changed. After the general examination was the palace examination. The palace examination was held in the imperial palace and was personally supervised by the emperor. The students who failed the examination left the capital one after another. Those who were qualified to participate in the palace examination entered a new round of revision. The results of the cheating case were also announced during this time. The punishment of the Grand Commandant was not announced yet. The punishment of the other people involved was announced. Those who committed serious crimes were all executed. Those who didn't receive the death penalty were punished according to the severity of the case. The examinees who intended to cheat were all stripped of their qualifications to participate in the imperial examination. Including those from the same family, they were not allowed to become an official for 3 generations. This punishment was very serious. If 3 generations couldn't become an official, even the most powerful family would fall. This Sun Xingqiao is from my hometown. I didn't expect him to do such a thing in private despite his sanctimonious appearance. I've interacted with him before. And Sun Jianmu. I know a few of the people on the list. Damn. Why did they have to do this? They've harmed themselves and their families. They deserved it. They wanted to take a shortcut, but they didn't know if they had the life to enjoy it. To be honest, I received a similar letter at that time. It was very exaggerated, but I didn't believe it. I received it too. Me too. They looked at each other and found that they were not the only ones who were targeted. The case was over and the results of the general examination were out. They didn't have to be as cautious as before. After asking each other, they found that many of them were targeted. The only thing they had in common was that they were all from poor families. It was not a secret that the emperor liked to use officials from poor families. Those who could participate in the spring imperial examination more or less had some understanding of the situation in the imperial court. Once the results were out, the ultimate goal of the cheating case was clear. Fortunately, I only believe in my own efforts. I'm not tempted. Me too. The people who gathered had a look of fear. After a moment of silence, Jiang Huiqing said, "This has taught us a lesson. In the future, if we are lucky enough to enter the imperial court as an official, we should focus on serving the great Huan dynasty. Don't think too much about other things." That's right. We study hard so that we can serve the country one day. Soon, some of us will be able to realize our dreams. In the future, we should restrain ourselves. His words were echoed by the crowd. The hidden dragon guards presented the conversation between the students to the emperor. During this period of time, the situation was special. Shang Junlin sent a team of hidden dragon guards to collect information from outside the imperial palace. If anything went wrong, they would be able to intervene. It's a blessing in disguise. It's a lesson for these students who haven't entered the imperial court yet. Shun Yu finished reading Jiang Huiqing's letter and said. Jiang Huiqing's letter was about the discussion between the students about the cheating case. He was there at the time and wrote a letter to Shun Yu. With Jiang Huiqing outside, Yu is more informed than me. Shang Junlin took the letter from Shun Yu's hand and put it aside after reading it. The secret letter from the hidden dragon guards was placed there. Jiang Huiqing's letter and the secret letter from the hidden dragon guards arrived at the same time. He seems to like writing to Yu. Before the exam results were out, he wrote to Yu a lot. These few days, he sent a few more letters. Did Yu reply to his letter? Of course, Yu replied. If not, Jiang Huiqing wouldn't send letters to the imperial palace one after another. It seems like he did. Shang Junlin rubbed the young man's soft neck. What did Yu say to him? Chapter 66. Shun Yu tilted her head. Your Majesty, just ask. Don't touch me. Shang Junlin pinched Shun Yu's neck and let go. He said honestly, I like to touch Yu. Does Yu like it? Shun Yu blushed. She looked down and didn't say anything. Shang Junlin was worried that he would scare her away if he teased her too much, so he changed the topic. Prince Yu has been clamoring to see me. Prince Yu. Shun Yu looked up. What does he want? He said that he is innocent. He hopes that I will find out the truth and clear his name. Shang Junlin's eyes darkened when he mentioned Prince Yu. What about the people behind Prince Yu? Nothing happened. Shun Yu remembered that Shang Junlin said that the late emperor left many good things for Prince Yu. It's strange. The He family didn't do anything after they came to the capital. It seems that they are just here to have fun. Shang Junlin ordered the hidden dragon guards to keep an eye on the situation in the capital. I thought they would do something. What about young Master He? Shun Yu pondered. It would be fine if young Master He did something, but if he didn't do anything, it would be unsettling. Everything is as usual. Ever since the prison break, Shang Junlin had become even stricter with the young Master He. If there was a chance in the past to secretly rescue him, there was no chance of that happening now. Don't worry. Shang Junlin walked to Shun Yu and pulled her into his arms. He kissed her neck. I will take care of it. The He family won't come to the capital for no reason. Since they are here, they will definitely do something. Shun Yu stopped thinking about it. Worrying wouldn't solve the problem. A Yu said that Xing is right. In the He family's courtyard. Father, are we really not doing anything? Young master, he didn't look good. My brother is missing. We came to the capital but didn't tell us what to do. Does Xing think that it is fun to walk us around? I'm also worried about your brother. Patriarch, he knew where his youngest son was. Wasn't he worried? That was the Stardark prison. No matter who went there, they would lose a layer of skin. But what was the use of being anxious? Could it be that he could still break into the prison? I don't think so, eldest young master, he said coldly. If Xing was really worried, father should have asked around for brother's whereabouts after coming to the capital. But what did father do? He warned us to behave ourselves, not to reveal our identities, and not to do anything. I naturally have my reasons for doing this, Patriarch, he said helplessly. What reason could there be? What's more important than finding my brother? Eldest young master, he was dissatisfied. I don't think father has any intention of looking for my younger brother. Father, you don't want a star. Give me some men and I'll go look for a star myself. Shut up. Patriarch, he was so angry that he was trembling. What did my star say before we came? Be careful. The capital is not like home. If you are not careful, you will make a big mistake. Stay here. Without my orders, you are not allowed to step out of the courtyard. Eldest young master, he couldn't believe it. Father, you don't have to worry about your brother. I said that I can bring him back this time. Patriarch, he flung his sleeves and walked away. Eldest young master, he stood in the courtyard and slowly clenched his fists. Young master. The servant walked forward. Eldest young master and youngest young master were born from the same mother. They had a good relationship since they were young. If youngest young master went missing, eldest young master would be the most anxious. He finally had some clues but was told not to act rashly. How could he accept that? If father doesn't want to look for him, I'll go. You, eldest young master, he pointed at the servant. Bring our men and secretly ask around. Remember, don't make too big of a commotion and don't let father's men find out. Xing the servant replied and left. Eldest young master, his actions were considered secretive. However, he couldn't hide from the hidden dragon guards. The moment he made a move, the news was sent to the palace. Eldest young master, he is very close to his younger brother. Xinyu flipped through the letter. It seems that Patriarch, he didn't tell eldest young master about his younger son. Xing probably thinks that eldest young master is not reliable. Even if he hid it, he would cause trouble. Xing gave us a loophole. We might be able to find out something through eldest young master he. Xinyu thought so too. I plan to meet King Yu. Yu, do you want to come along? Shang Junlin asked. Xinyu nodded. Xinyu was quite interested to see King Yu in trouble. The beginning of spring had passed and the weather was getting warmer. Xinyu took off his thick winter coat and wore a blue casual outfit. He looked even more handsome. When he met King Yu again, he didn't look as elegant as he usually did. If King Yu was rated 7 points in the past, he would only be rated 4 points now. His hair was messy and his face was pale. His eyes were sunken and he looked dispirited. King Yu stared blankly at the tall figure approaching with the jade-like young man. Xun Yu was more charming than when he first met him. Shang Junlin took good care of him. His complexion was ruddy and his face was chubbier. He wasn't as thin as before and his temperament was more restrained. Seeing the two people getting closer and closer, King Yu didn't know why but a strange feeling rose in his heart. It was as if something important had left him and there was no possibility of it returning. He opened his mouth but the words he wanted to say were stuck in his throat. He couldn't make a sound for a long time. How can you not salute your majesty? While he was in a daze, the jailer couldn't stand it and scolded him harshly. King Yu recovered from his trance and noticed Shang Junlin's arm around Xun Yu's waist. He stared at the arm as if he wanted to dig a hole in it. Noticing his gaze, Shang Junlin quietly tightened his arm and let Xun Yu get closer to him. Under the watchful eyes of the jailer, King Yu reluctantly saluted them. Greetings to your majesty, your majesty. King Yu knocked his forehead on the ground for a long time but didn't hear Shang Junlin's voice. He raised his head slightly and looked up. Shang Junlin looked down at him with no emotion in his eyes. It was as if he wasn't looking at Xing but at an inconspicuous ant at his feet. Xing was like this again. Xing was like this again. King Yu tensed his body and didn't allow himself to lose his composure. In the past, he was Imperial Father's favorite prince. Everyone tried to curry favor with him. Shang Junlin was only Xing's son who was disliked by Imperial Father. No one in the palace took him seriously. Even the powerful eunuchs and palace maids could step on him. However, it was Shang Junlin like Xing who sat on the position they all dreamed of and became the biggest winner. Shun Yu looked at King Yu who was kneeling on the ground. He saw his unwillingness, but so what? In this life, he was destined to carry his unwillingness to the end of his life. He would find that no matter how hard he tried, Shang Junlin was still a towering mountain in front of him. He couldn't cross it. Thinking of this, Shun Yu chuckled softly. His laughter broke the frozen atmosphere. Shang Junlin looked at King Yu for a while and said, "I heard that you threatened to see me with your life." King Yu was embarrassed. Once upon a time, he was the one who was superior to Shang Junlin. Every dog has its day. Today, in front of Shun Yu, his position was reversed. He couldn't say. His star was angry purely because Shang Junlin was one rank lower, and his star was angry because this situation happened in front of Shun Yu. Even though so much time had passed, he still couldn't forget that first startled glimpse and the first throbbing of his heart. He really wanted to straighten his back and be a little more strong-willed, but now that he had a favor to ask of someone, he couldn't. "I want to ask your Majesty to give me justice. What the military officer did really has nothing to do with me. I beg your Majesty to judge clearly." He could only kneel in front of Shang Junlin and beg him to let him go this time. In front of Shun Yu. King Yu clenched his teeth tightly. His heart was burning. He must take back his position. The one who had the last laugh must be him. "I know." A cold voice came from the top of his head. King Yu looked up in disbelief. "Your Majesty knows why you still." His voice gradually disappeared, and his face became more and more ugly. King Yu was not stupid. He thought carefully. Since Shang Junlin knew that he was wronged, why did he let the rumors spread and even spread to his ears? There was only one possibility: you did it on purpose. King Yu could no longer maintain his calm appearance. "Why did you do it? You know that I didn't do these things. Why did you put the blame on me? You didn't do this. But what about those women?" Shun Yu looked at him coldly. King Yu looked at Shun Yu in astonishment. "You did it?" Shun Yu avoided the question. "Your people went to cause trouble for the residents of Northern Marquis. Xing found the right person." In the eyes of the outside world, Shun Yu and the residents of Northern Marquis were inseparable. As the legitimate son of Northern Marquis, the relationship between the two was bound together. When Shun Yu entered the palace, many people laughed at Northern Marquis for sending his legitimate son into the palace. Now, many people felt that Northern Marquis was farsighted. So what if he was the legitimate son? Who could be so lucky to be favored by His Majesty alone? "Why did you do this?" King Yu was so shocked that he moved forward a few steps. "Are you still angry with me? There is nothing between me and Shen Qingran. I only looked for him because—" "King Yu, be careful with your words." Without waiting for him to finish, Shang Junlin interrupted him coldly. Feeling the strength around his waist increasing, Shun Yu reached out and patted the big palm on his waist to comfort him. When he turned to look at King Yu, there was only coldness in his eyes. "King Yu, don't talk nonsense. We have nothing to do with each other. You don't need to tell me about your relationship with Shen Qingran. I don't care. Whoever you are with has nothing to do with me. Do you understand?" The young man's voice was as cold as ice. The biting cold air was like an ice blade cutting through the skin and spreading from the outside to the inside. For a moment, King Yu almost felt that his heart was frozen. Once again, he deeply realized that he had completely lost Shun Yu. No, he didn't get it from the beginning. How could he lose it? King Yu smiled bitterly. "You gave Xin Xing to those women? How do you know this? When you hid your identity to get close to me, you also used the same method to get close to others. Did you really think that I didn't know anything?" Shun Yu answered carelessly. King Yu collapsed. "So you knew from the beginning that I approached you with a purpose?" Shen Yu didn't answer. In King Yu's eyes, Xing had acquiesced. I thought that we had feelings for each other. I was sad for a long time because of what happened in the past. King Yu murmured in a low voice. What happened in the past? Shen Yu suddenly remembered how Xing, who was disgusted by his previous life, was disgusted. He was silent. Shang Junlin also thought of something. He looked sideways at Shen Yu and intimately stroked the hair on his temples, speaking of which, in terms of seniority, King Yu should call a Yu imperial sister-in-law Cai Xing. King Yu felt as if he was struck by lightning. Chapter 67. King Yu looked at Shang Junlin and then looked at Shen Yu, who was half leaning in Shang Junlin's arms. The expression on his face could be described as brilliant. Shang Junlin was right. In terms of seniority, Shen Yu was indeed his royal sister-in-law. What was this? The person he liked for the first time was together with his elder brother who he didn't get along with? King Yu's mind was in a mess when he heard the words royal sister-in-law. Looking at the intimate posture of the two people, his heart was in a trance. Also, the title a Yu used to be exclusive to him, but it was ruthlessly taken away when the young man turned around. Now, the only person who was qualified to call Shen Yu this way was Shang Junlin. Endless bitterness welled up in his heart. King Yu pulled the corner of his mouth, but his smile was uglier than crying. The coldness on Shen Yu's face was broken by Shang Junlin's words. Fortunately, he didn't laugh out loud. Especially when he saw King Yu's trance, his heart was even happier. This sentence was obviously a big blow to King Yu. Since Shang Junlin said this sentence, King Yu had been in a trance. After a long time, King Yu barely recovered. Shang Junlin was talking to Shen Yu in a low voice. Shen Yu had a faint smile on his face, which was completely different from his usual cold appearance. The more King Yu looked at him, the more uncomfortable he felt. However, he refused to look away and stared at the two of them as if he was torturing himself. Noticing his gaze, Shang Junlin casually glanced at him. The warning in his eyes made King Yu tremble with fear. He panicked and looked away. Some people only know the meaning of regret after losing something. Shen Yu didn't know what King Yu was thinking and didn't want to know. The fate between him and King Yu was cut off by him in his previous life. Not to mention that in this life, even if there was no Shang Junlin, Shen Yu wouldn't turn back to King Yu. He would only torture people to death. The more King Yu cared about something, the more he wouldn't let him get it. Lowering his eyes and restraining the coldness in his eyes, Shen Yu lowered his head and looked at Yu Wang. Yu Wang, have you ever thought about the consequences of your actions on those women? What? Prince Yu was stunned by Shen Yu's sudden question. His eyes widened as he asked, are you speaking up for those women? Ha ha ha, King Yu suddenly laughed. Speaking of harming these women, don't you think that your actions have caused more harm to them than mine? Shen Yu raised his eyebrows. You're the one who did something wrong. Why are you blaming it on me? Telling them the truth in advance is better than being kept in the dark by you for the rest of your life. At least I didn't let them lose face in public, and I didn't let them bring shame to their family. Shen Yu, oh Shen Yu, you've always been smart. Have you ever thought that when this matter is exposed, the one who will be hurt the most is not me, but those women? Shen Yu looked at him silently. Thinking that his thoughts had been seen through, the smile on King Yu's face widened. He looked at Chen Yu, the malice in his eyes undisguised. The outside world's rumors and the family's oppression will destroy these women. And the main culprit behind all of this is you. Shen Yu wasn't surprised by the sudden change in Yu Wang's attitude. In his previous life, he had seen every side of Yu Wang, so he knew this person very well. He said that he loved whoever he liked, but in fact, he only loved himself. Shen Yu didn't doubt that if Shen Qingran didn't have those useful strategies for Yu Wang in his previous life, the two of them would still be together. Seeing no change in Shen Yu's expression, Yu Wang's smile slowly disappeared. So, you know that your actions will harm those women, but you still do it for your own selfish desires, right? Shen Yu looked at Yu Wang from top to bottom, and the sarcasm in his eyes was undisguised. Your Highness, Yu Wang really surprises people all the time. Yu Wang subconsciously wanted to refute, but Shen Yu didn't give him a chance and continued, so Yu Wang can only be Yu Wang for a lifetime, and your majesty will always be Dahuan's majesty. Yu Wang was shocked and jumped up regardless of etiquette. Don't you know that you can't talk nonsense? Yu Wang was shocked when his most secret thoughts were revealed. He knew that Shang Junlin might have realized that he had bad intentions, but so what? There was no evidence, and Shang Junlin didn't dare to do anything to him because of the late emperor's will. Except for Shang Junlin and his closest confidants, no one else should know about this. When he deliberately approached Shen Yu, he didn't tell him about this. How did Shen Yu know about it? Shen Yu suddenly smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. He intimately leaned on Shang Junlin and looked at Yu Wang with cold eyes. Your Majesty, do you think I'm talking nonsense? Yu Wang knows what you've done. Don't treat me as a fool. Shang Junlin responded to Shen Yu's words. Sure enough, he knew everything. Yu Wang staggered back. After a series of blows, the bad premonition in his heart became stronger and stronger. Yu Wang, you don't have to worry about those women. His Majesty has already predicted the results you said. Without you, those women will only live better and better. Instead of worrying about others, you should worry more about yourself. There are some things that not everyone has the right to covet. Shang Junlin, you did it on purpose, didn't you? You used those women to catch me, and now you're telling me these things. From the beginning, you didn't plan to let me go, right? Yu Wang was no longer submissive after he figured out the cause and effect. Unfortunately, with Royal Father's last words, just based on this, you can't touch me at all. Shang Junlin, so what if you're sitting in that position now? The person Royal Father likes has never been you. The late Emperor's recognition is nothing. He couldn't even protect his own country. Shen Yu said, the recognition of the world is the recognition. His Majesty has the support of the people. Or, do you think you're better than His Majesty? When the jailer heard this, he was shocked. He carefully looked at Shang Junlin's face and secretly broke into a sweat for Shen Yu. The late emperor was the late emperor. Even if His Majesty and the late emperor were not close, he was still the emperor of a country and His Majesty's father. Shen Yu said that about the late emperor. When he saw Shang Junlin's face, he was surprised. Shang Junlin looked calm and didn't get angry because of Shen Yu's words. There was even a faint smile in his eyes. Before he could look further, Shang Junlin glanced at him. When he looked at others, he didn't look as gentle as when he looked at Shen Yu. Under his piercing gaze, the jailer quickly looked away and lowered his head. In his heart, he had a new understanding of how favored Shen Guijun was. Shen Yu listed one by one. How much territory have you recovered? How many enemies have you defeated? How many people have you saved? With each question, King Yu's face turned ugly. He didn't do any of these things. After listing, Shen Yu raised his eyebrows slightly. So, how do you think you are better than His Majesty? King Yu was speechless. Yu is really good at talking. On the carriage back to the palace, Shang Junlin poured a cup of tea and handed it to Shen Yu. Drink it to moisten your throat. Just now, he talked too much. Shen Yu was indeed thirsty. He picked up the cup and drank it in one gulp. I don't like him. He used to hide his identity and get close to me. His words belittled His Majesty. He doesn't even know if he is worthy. Shang Junlin was amused by Shen Yu's straightforward words. Yu really thinks that I am so good. Of course, His Majesty is the best. Shen Yu opened his mouth and said nice words. No one can compare to His Majesty. Shang Junlin was very happy. He took Shen Yu into his arms. Yu is also the best. Shen Yu was used to Shang Junlin's kisses and hugs from time to time. She found a comfortable position and lay down. After lying down for a while, Shen Yu remembered what happened just now. She poked Shang Junlin's arm. Why did His Majesty suddenly tell King Yu that I am his imperial sister-in-law? Ahum, Shang Junlin coughed twice. In a place where Shen Yu couldn't see, his earlobes turned red. He tried to answer in a normal tone. He and I have the same father but different mothers. He is younger than me. You are my wife. Naturally, he should call you imperial sister-in-law. Really? Shen Yu turned from Shang Junlin's arms to face him and looked straight into his eyes. Shang Junlin's eyes flashed slightly. Really? Oh, Shen Yu deliberately dragged out her words. I thought His Majesty was jealous and wanted to declare your sovereignty to King Yu. It seems that I was thinking too much. After saying that, Shen Yu was about to get down. Shang Junlin's arms tightened and restrained Shen Yu's movements. His lips moved, but his voice was so low that it was almost inaudible. Yu is right. Zhen is jealous. Ha ha ha, Shen Yu was overjoyed. She laughed and fell into Shang Junlin's arms. His Majesty, you are too cute. Shang Junlin corrected her again, not cute. His hands were very gentle. He hugged Shen Yu and supported her from time to time to prevent her from falling. His Majesty was also very cute when he was serious. Shen Yu rested her forehead on Shang Junlin's shoulder. She gradually calmed down. The carriage swayed. Shen Yu knocked against Shang Junlin's body several times. Under such intimate contact, it was easy to have some reactions. Shen Yu had no choice but to sit up straight and move back a little. Why is the road suddenly so difficult to walk on? Shen Yu remembered that the road was not so bumpy when they left the palace last time. Meng Chang. Eunuch Meng heard the conversation inside and explained, I don't know who dug a lot of holes on the road. There are also some stones, so it is more difficult to walk on. Shen Yu curiously lifted the curtain. The road outside was indeed bumpy. Not many people usually use this road. Who dug it and damaged it? The road from the palace to the secret prison was not the main road. Shen Yu and Shang Junlin had not met anyone several times. Looking at the traces of damage on the road, it was obvious that it was caused by someone. At this moment, there was a quarrel in front of them. Shen Yu poked Shang Junlin's shoulder. Shang Junlin paused and ordered, Meng Chang, go and take a look. Yes. Eunuch Meng got off the carriage and came back soon. The two carriages in front collided. Eunuch Meng looked embarrassed. The road ahead is blocked. Your Majesty and Gui Jun may have to wait for a while. It's okay. Shen Yu turned to look at Shang Junlin. Your Majesty, shall we go and take a look? Yes. The two of them got off the carriage and followed Eunuch Meng to the place where the quarrel came from. The owners saw someone coming and looked over at the same time. One of them was Official Fang and his family. Official Fang subconsciously bowed when he saw Shang Junlin and Shen Yu. He hesitated for a moment when he saw that the two of them, including Eunuch Meng, were dressed casually. After a while, the owner of the other family walked in front of Shen Yu and Shang Junlin. I'm really sorry. There is a problem with my carriage. Please wait for a moment. I will try my best to compensate you later. How should I address you? The one who spoke was a man with a handsome face. He was gentle and polite. When he saw Shen Yu, his eyes lit up. Shang Junlin held Shen Yu. My surname is Lin. This is my wife. Chapter 68. This humble one was rude. The man bowed slightly and apologized. This humble one is Yang Zheng. I'm really sorry. Yang Zheng's appearance was handsome, and his pair of peach blossom eyes seemed to contain some indescribable feelings when he looked at others. He was dressed in an indigo long robe with wide sleeves, and his every movement was very elegant. Shen Yu looked at him for a while and felt the arm around his waist tighten, so he withdrew his gaze. Da Huan had always been open, so it wasn't strange for men to be together. Yang Zheng quickly adjusted his expression and looked in the direction that Shen Yu and Shang Junlin came from. Did the two of you drive past here? I just heard the sound of a carriage. Yes, our carriage is behind, Shen Yu said. We heard the noise here, so we came to see what happened. At this time, Fang Daren, who was dressed in casual clothes, also came over. He saw that Shen Yu didn't want to reveal their identity, so he tactfully didn't say anything. This humble one's carriage had some problems. It collided with another carriage. Yang Zheng smiled bitterly. I don't know why, but when I came here, the road was full of potholes. Shen Yu looked around and saw that the road was even worse than the one they came from. When we passed by here, it was still flat. How did it become like this in just over 2 hours? Shen Yu remembered that when he came here with Shang Junlin, the road wasn't so bad. He didn't know what happened in the past 2 hours to make the road like this. To be honest, this isn't the first time I've encountered this kind of thing. I'm afraid that the two of you were implicated by me. If I didn't take this road, I don't think this kind of thing would have happened. This wasn't the first time Yang Zheng encountered this kind of thing. He didn't know if it was purely because of his bad luck, or because of someone's interference. While they were talking, the servants of the two families had already dealt with the carriage accident. Yang Zheng wanted to treat the two families to a meal to apologize. Shang Junlin wasn't busy today. Seeing that Shen Yu didn't object, he agreed. Coincidentally, Yang Zheng was treating them to Yingxing Tower. The waiter was very enthusiastic. When he saw the group of people, he quickly came up to them. "Are you all together? What do you want?" Shen Yu pointed at Yang Zheng. "We are together. Today, he is the host. You can ask him." Yang Zheng was quite familiar with Yingxing Tower. He asked for a private room and ordered the restaurant's signature dishes. Then, he turned around and said to Shen Yu and the other two, "I'll just order some random dishes first. If you guys want anything else, just order it directly." There were already a lot of dishes. Shen Yu and Lord Fang had no objections, but Shang Junlin, who had been quiet all this time, ordered a few more dishes. Hearing the names of the dishes, Shen Yu's eyes flashed. These were all his favorite dishes. Madame Fang and Miss Fang were female. Yang Zheng considerately asked for a private room for them, which was right next to theirs. As a woman with a title, Madame Fang had seen Shang Junlin before. She didn't breathe a sigh of relief until she reached the private room. "Mother, why are you so nervous all the way here?" Fang Jiari poured a cup of tea for her mother. "It's the first time I see that person in casual clothes. I'm still not used to it." Madame Fang took a sip of tea and slowly calmed down. Madame Fang thought that Fang Jiari had met Her Majesty and Lord Guizhen, so she didn't have any scruples in speaking. However, she didn't know that Fang Jiari and Lord Guizhen were disguised when they met. According to Lord Fang's attitude towards them, Fang Jiari already had some guesses. Madame Fang's words confirmed her guess. What she saw today was the true appearance of Her Majesty and Lord Guizhen. The rumors are true. That person really loves the children of the Shen family. Madame Fang was experienced. She could tell at a glance whether Her Majesty was sincere or not. Her Majesty's love for Lord Guizhen and the affection in her eyes couldn't lie. Of course they are a match made in heaven. Fang Jiari had already seen it. What surprised her the most was Her Majesty's attitude towards Lord Guizhen. She didn't know how the two of them got along in the palace. When they were outside, Lord Guizhen was in charge of many things. Madame Fang also agreed with this point. She smiled and said, "In the past, I would never have thought that Her Majesty would be like this when she has a sweetheart. I don't know if you noticed, but they don't talk about seniority when they get along. She acts like an ordinary person who has fallen in love." Shen Yu didn't know that Fang Jiari and her son were talking about him and Shang Junlin in the private room. Yang Zheng was very enthusiastic, and his way of dealing with people was very comfortable. Under his intention, Shang Junlin wasn't as taciturn as usual. The small banquet could be said to be enjoyable for both the guests and the host. After it was over, Shen Yu and Shang Junlin left first. Not long after, official Fang also got up and left. Yang Zheng stood by the window and watched the man gently and slowly carry the youth into the carriage. His eyes were full of emotions that others couldn't understand. "If Gongzi likes Gongzi Yu, why not? Be careful with your words," Yang Zheng interrupted the servant. "They are a married couple who are deeply in love. Why would I be a bad person and disturb them?" It wasn't that Yang Zheng didn't feel that the man was good to Shen Yu. He admitted that he had some unspeakable thoughts when he invited him, but now these thoughts had been cut off. He quietly observed that throughout the meal, the man was intentionally or unintentionally taking care of the youth. It wasn't intentional, but a natural habit. This showed that the man had already engraved the principle of taking care of the youth into his bones. He had come to the capital for proper business. Romance was ultimately just a way to adjust his life. But, no buts, Yang Zheng knocked the servant's head with his fan. "How's the thing I asked you to do? It's all done. Gongzi, are we really not going back in the future? What, is there someone you can't let go of there? Gongzi, don't make fun of people. I just feel that it's not worth it. Obviously, Gongzi is the one." "Why?" Yang Zheng sneered. "If I want to do it, I'll do it. What's there to say about whether it's worth it or not? You're so young, why do you have to worry so much? When have you ever seen your Gongzi suffer? Yang Zheng looked at the carriage in the distance. Judging from the temperament of the two people, he was afraid that their identities weren't that simple. Inside the carriage, Shen Yu half leaned against the window. Your Majesty, who do you think dug up that road? Shang Junlin, that road has never been used by people. It's impossible for it to become like that for no reason. Moreover, we can only stay in the dark prison for 2 hours at most. If they want to do something, 2 hours is enough. Shen Yu, this matter is directed at Yang Zheng? Or is it directed at us? Shang Junlin, if it's directed at us, it doesn't make sense that it's just digging up the road. It's most likely directed at Yang Zheng. Shen Yu also thought so. Speaking of roads, Shen Yu remembered something that Shen Qingran took out in his previous life, cement. The ratio of cement to cement was described in detail in the book he read after his death. Shen Yu planned to write down the formula after returning to the palace and see if he could try to make it. Compared to the current roads, cement roads were indeed much more convenient. After returning to the palace, the first thing Shen Yu did was to sit in front of the table and write down the things in his mind from memory. After his death in his previous life, he stayed in that empty space for a long time. The only thing he could use to pass the time was that book. Shen Yu read that book several times, especially the knowledge that didn't belong to this world. He carefully memorized it. At that time, Shen Yu didn't know that he could be reborn. He memorized these things out of interest. He was very curious about the world Shen Qingran lived in before he transmigrated. From the things vaguely shown in the book, it wasn't difficult to speculate what kind of wonderful world it was. After the formula was sorted out, Shen Yu put it in a small box. How to give it to Shang Junlin became a big problem. Of course, before it was officially put into use, it had to be tested first. Shen Yu memorized the formula again and listed out some precautions clearly. Then, he called Mu Shi over. Give this to the people in the village and let them make it according to what I wrote. Yes. Mu Shi didn't ask any more questions and put the box into his sleeve. How's the situation at Count North's residence? Sir Zhunbei is still looking for trouble with the Prince of Yu's people. I don't know what Shen Qingran did to anger Sir Zhunbei again. This time, even concubine Yu can't visit him. The cause was Prince Yu. Shen Qingran regarded Prince Yu as his last life-saving straw. Of course, he wouldn't easily break off the relationship with Prince Yu. He secretly revealed the matter of Count North's residence to Prince Yu's people, causing Count North to suffer a big loss. After knowing that it was Shen Qingran who did it, Count North was almost angered to death. I raised a good son for more than 10 years. Not only did he side with others, but he also told the enemy the weakness of Count North's residence. If I had known, I would have strangled him. Count North was so angry that his face turned red. Count North, please calm down. Qingran didn't do it on purpose. He is still young. I will teach him well. Concubine Yu grabbed Count North's hem and was kicked away. Still young. Count North was so angry that he laughed. Look at Shen Yu. They are about the same age. How can Shen Yu be so sensible and not bring trouble to the family? Look at your good son. What did he do? Not to mention the huge loss of benefits, the foundation of Count North was almost damaged. Count North valued Count North more than anything else. How could he tolerate this kind of thing? This Marquis really regretted not wanting a good legitimate son and spoiling an ingrate. Duke Zhunbei coldly glanced at concubine Yu, passed down the order. In the future, without this Marquis' permission, no one is allowed to see that unfilial son. If I find out that he is communicating with Prince Yu's people again, don't blame me for being cruel. After driving concubine Yu away, Count North summoned his confidant for a discussion. Count North, don't worry. With the eldest young master here, Count North's residence will be fine. Don't bother Shen Yu if you can. It's hard for him to do things in the palace. Let's solve the problem caused by Shen Qingran first. This matter was neither big nor small. Count North could solve it by himself, but it would hurt him a lot. When it came to the matters of the imperial court, Shen Yu heard about it from Shang Junlin. I'll let someone watch over him. I'm worried that he will beg you. If you want to interfere, just tell me. There's no need to do it yourself. Shang Junlin played with a strand of Shun Yu's hair that fell to her chest and said in a low voice, Your Majesty, you don't have to care about him. Shun Yu lazily leaned in Shang Junlin's arms. He won't beg me. I'll listen to you. Shang Junlin picked up the strand of hair and kissed it. Your Majesty, do you really listen to me for everything? Shun Yu became energetic. She rolled on the man's body and turned to face him. As if he had expected what Shun Yu was going to say, Shang Junlin lifted his chin and kissed him on the lips, except for this matter. Chapter 69. Shun Yu shook his head and broke free from the man's grip. Your Majesty, do you know what I'm talking about? Every time Yu is unwilling, Shang Junlin lifted his eyelids and looked at him. You don't want to care about me after you're satisfied. I'm not. Shun Yu's face turned red. It's because Your Majesty doesn't want to end it. If the imperial physician didn't say that Yu needs more rest, Yu would have fulfilled his duty. Shang Junlin's eyes lit up and he reached out to touch Shun Yu's neck. Yu, don't you think so? Your Majesty, you have to follow the physician's advice. Shun Yu had the imperial physician's words as a shield, so he was quite unscrupulous. You also have to restrain yourself. I'm already restraining myself. Shang Junlin's eyes were deep. Otherwise, do you think that I would let you go so easily? Because of Shun Yu's body, they didn't do it many times and didn't really get to the point. Occasionally, they would use their hands or legs. Shun Yu didn't want to continue talking about this dangerous topic, so he talked about another matter. Your Majesty, I made a new thing in the farmstead. I want to give it to Your Majesty. What is it? Seeing that Shun Yu was changing the topic, Shang Junlin didn't expose him, but his hands didn't stop moving. Shun Yu's neck was very sensitive, especially around a small mole. Shang Junlin loved this place very much and liked to bite it when they were intimate. Your Majesty, let go of me first. Shun Yu felt a numbing sensation spreading from the side of her neck. Shang Junlin stopped moving his hands, but he didn't want to move away. The man's body temperature soaked into her body through her skin. Shun Yu couldn't do anything but sit up slightly. If Your Majesty doesn't want to let me go, I'll go get it myself. It's in the compartment on the left. Shun Yu pointed to the compartment beside Shang Junlin. Following Shun Yu's guidance, Shang Junlin opened the lattice and took out a small wooden box without any decorative patterns. This? Yes, Your Majesty, open it and take a look. Shang Junlin opened the wooden box with one hand and saw what was inside. He had no choice but to let go of Shun Yu and unfolded the letter. In the beginning, Shang Junlin's attitude was a little careless. He always felt more relaxed when he was with Shun Yu. As time passed, Shang Junlin's expression gradually became serious. After reading it, Shang Junlin closed the letter and reached out to pull Shun Yu into his arms. His lips were close to Shun Yu's ear. Did you also learn this from the journal? There was an item called cement written on the paper. In addition to how to make it, there was also a detailed description of its use. Shang Junlin was a qualified ruler. He immediately thought of the importance of cement when he saw it. For the country and the people, this thing could play a great role. Your Majesty, it's fine if you think so. Shun Yu didn't want to hide the truth or tell the truth. He could only answer ambiguously. It's also called concrete. Shang Junlin gently bit Shun Yu's earlobe. Yu really surprises me all the time. He saw that Shun Yu didn't want to say anything, so he didn't force him. Shun Yu was willing to give him this thing, which was enough to show how important he was to him. Otherwise, Shun Yu could have not taken it out in order not to arouse his suspicion. Last time, when Shun Yu gave him the flood control manual, after the official in charge of this area finished reading it, he told him that it was a very complete system. It couldn't be pieced together from various books. He directly asked him to find an expert, but Shang Junlin casually brushed him off. The people in my village have developed some products. Your Majesty, do you want to take a look? Seeing that Shang Junlin didn't intend to ask further, Shun Yu was relieved. I'm afraid it's not easy to move it into the palace. Just go directly to your village and take a look. Shang Junlin hugged Shun Yu tightly. I'm very happy that you gave me something. No matter what Shen Yu gave him, Shang Junlin's joy was the same. What he valued was Shen Yu's heart for giving him something, not the gift itself. After the two tied it up, they left the palace. The people in the village received the news that Shen Yu and Shang Junlin were coming and made preparations in advance, especially regarding the cement. The person in charge carefully watched every place and didn't allow any mistakes to be made. While everyone in the village was looking forward to it, the carriage carrying Shen Yu and Shang Junlin arrived late. The person in charge stood at the front, followed by the people who worked in the village. These people were Shen Yu's own people. They already knew about the relationship between Shen Yu and Shang Junlin from Mu Shi. Shen Yu told Mu Shi to let these people treat Shang Junlin as half of their own people. As usual, Shang Junlin got off the carriage first. After he got off, he reached out to help Shen Yu down. Shen Yu could get off the carriage by himself, but Shang Junlin didn't let him. At first, he wanted to carry Shen Yu down, but Shen Yu firmly refused. So, he took a step back and helped Shen Yu down. Shen Yu also didn't understand what Shang Junlin was thinking. How could the dignified emperor fall in love with helping people get off the carriage? However, Shang Junlin insisted, so Shen Yu could only let him do as he pleased. Today, the two of them were wearing clothes of similar colors. Standing together, it was very pleasing to the eye. The person in charge came up to them and said, "Your Majesty, Your Highness, everything is ready. Tea and snacks are also prepared. Take us directly to see the fruit." Shen Yu interrupted the person in charge's long-winded speech. The person in charge brought the two of them over and roughly explained the process. Soon, they arrived at the destination. The open space was divided into two parts. The left side was a flat cement floor, and the right side was the place where the cement was mixed. There were piles of various raw materials, and more than 10 men in short clothes were busy. "This is the road that Your Highness said was paved." Shen Yu walked closer with Shang Junlin. He had seen the finished product in his previous life, so he wasn't surprised. Instead, it was Shang Junlin who saw such a flat road for the first time. He couldn't hide the shock in his eyes. Shen Yu saw that there were gaps in the road at intervals. He nodded with satisfaction and said, "Well done." The person in charge brought the two of them to the other side and said, "This place is solidified. You can walk on it. Even if it rains, it won't affect the road." The person in charge had received Shen Yu's letter in advance, so he knew what to show. First, he let Shen Yu and Shang Junlin walk on it to feel it. Then, he ordered people to bring a bucket of water and pour it on the ground. Shang Junlin held Shen Yu's hand and walked slowly on the cement road. He could clearly feel that this road was different from the previous one. If a carriage were to drive on it, it would be much less bumpy. After walking one round, Shang Junlin held Shen Yu's hand tightly. The feeling of seeing it with his own eyes was completely different. The shock of the former was less than 1/10 of the latter. Although it was only a short section of the road, Shang Junlin could already imagine what it would be like when the official roads of the capital were paved with such roads. Not only the capital, but the entire Da Huan also needed to be paved with such roads. With a smooth road, communication would be faster. This would be of great help to Shang Junlin in managing the entire Da Huan. Shen Yu could feel Shang Junlin's excitement. He smiled and said, "Your Majesty, I don't have many people in my village. This is already the limit. I have already given the formula for the cement to Your Majesty. Your Majesty, you can order people to build a road to see the effect. To be treated like this by a you, I am really..." Shang Junlin pressed his forehead against Shen Yu's and said in a low voice, "How should I thank a you?" "Your Majesty, you don't have to thank me. I didn't think of this in the first place. To be useful to Your Majesty, it is Your Majesty's fate. Your Majesty, you don't have to think too much." Shen Yu didn't take out these things to take credit for himself. These things were useful to Da Huan and Shang Junlin. Under the guidance of the steward, the two went to see the process of making the cement. It wasn't difficult to make the cement. The raw materials weren't expensive either. It wouldn't be difficult to popularize it. After looking around, Shang Junlin made a decision. The two didn't stay in the village for long. After returning to the palace, Shang Junlin immediately summoned the Minister of Works and told him the method of making the cement. After reading it, the Minister of Works couldn't hide his excitement. This thing is really useful. What is it called? Cement, also known as concrete. It's mixed with solidified sand and stone. Other than paving roads, it should have many other uses. The Minister of Works' eyes lit up. Ever since Shang Junlin ascended the throne, their Ministry of Works hadn't had any great achievements. Now that they finally had a great opportunity, they had to seize it. I'll leave it to you. It's up to you to develop what you want. The road from the palace to the secret prison is broken. You can use it to practice. Yes, Your Majesty. The Minister of Works took the formula back and immediately arranged for people to start working. The current emperor valued people who could do practical things. It wasn't easy for the Ministry of Works to show off their skills. They couldn't let it go. The road that Shang Junlin circled out wasn't used by many people. For the sake of convenience, the Minister of Works ordered people to surround the road and tell the public that it was being repaired. That road was broken to begin with. It was normal that it needed to be repaired. The people who received the news didn't think much about it. It was just that people who occasionally wanted to use that road had to take a detour. Yang Jing also heard the news. He turned and said to the servant, "It's because of our road that it's broken. We can't let the Ministry of Works repair it for us for free. Go and ask around. If they lack anything, send it to them." The servant, who knew his master's personality, acknowledged and went to do the task. He put the fan under his chin and curled his lips in a good mood. If he was lucky, he might be able to get the Ministry of Works to help him. If those people knew that they gave him such a good opportunity for free, he wondered if they would die from anger. The Ministry of Works was in full swing. The people of the Ministry of Works had a great change in attitude in the imperial court and attracted the attention of many officials. Those who were close to the Minister of Works went up to ask for the reason. They all received the same answer: they're repairing the road. It's just repairing the road. Do you need to be so excited? This person didn't understand. You don't understand. The Minister of Works' eyes were full of passion. You'll know when we're done. Our Ministry of Works is finally going to rise. This time, the person who asked the question really didn't understand. He shook his head and left. After giving the item away, Xinyu didn't spend much time on it. In the previous life, the King of Yu relied on this to make huge profits and saved up some capital. This time, Xinyu gave the item to Shang Junlin in advance. With the imperial court stepping in, they directly blocked the King of Yu's source of income and also cut off Shen Qingran's path to fame. Thinking of this, Xinyu was in a good mood. What are you thinking about? Why are you so happy? Shang Junlin pinched Xinyu's chin and turned Xinyu's head to face him. I'm thinking that Da Huan will become better and better under Your Majesty's governance. If that's the case, I'll be able to follow Your Majesty and enjoy happiness. Xinyu's smile didn't disappear. His dark eyes seemed to contain thousands of stars. Shang Junlin was mesmerized by those smiling eyes and couldn't help but move closer. I won't disappoint you. Chapter 70. The man's breath was getting closer and closer. Xinyu didn't dodge and just stared at him. Shang Junlin chuckled and kissed Xinyu's lips. The laughter disappeared as their lips met. The gentleness gradually became stronger. Xinyu's breath was unstable and he fell back. He was supported by a strong arm. His eyes were slightly closed and his long eyelashes fluttered uneasily. He was like a butterfly that was about to fall in the wind and rain. After the kiss, the man's breath was still lingering on his lips. Xinyu opened his eyes in a daze and a magnified pair of eyes came into view. He looked straight into a pair of dark and deep eyes. The warm touch moved up his lips, cheeks, and eyelids. Every part of his body was carefully visited. The biting cold aura hovered and didn't dissipate for a long time. When he was finally released, Xinyu's eyes were hazy with tears. Shang Junlin looked down at him for a while and said in a low and hoarse voice, "Xin will carry you to the bed." After he finished speaking, he didn't wait for Xinyu to react and directly picked him up while facing him. Caught off guard, Xinyu's feet were in the air. He tightly hugged the man's neck and his thoughts were pulled away from the memories just now. Your Majesty, this time, Jin will tell you in advance. Shang Junlin's voice carried a satisfied smile. Shun Yu reacted for a while and then remembered that Shang Junlin was talking about what he had said before. It turned out that Shang Junlin had also firmly remembered this sentence. Shun Yu looked down. Because of his posture, he was taller than Shang Junlin. As he looked at the man from top to bottom, an indescribable feeling arose in his heart. It was soft and numb, sour and sweet. He didn't hate this feeling. He let it spread in his heart and slowly fill up his entire heart. Shang Junlin did not put him down. Instead, he carried him to the couch and placed him in his arms. Sometimes I wonder if a Yu was specially sent to me by the heavens. Shang Junlin buried his head in Shun Yu's neck, his voice almost inaudible. When the great Huan Sea clears, will a Yu be taken away by the heavens? What are you thinking, Your Majesty? After being pulled back to reality by Shang Junlin's words, Shun Yu found it funny. I'm a living person. If I'm not liked by my father, where else can I go except by His Majesty's side? Shang Junlin tightened his arms and said in a low voice, You can't leave me. No one can take you away from me. Shun Yu raised his hand and patted the man's head. I won't. I live very well by His Majesty's side. If I leave His Majesty, where else can I live as freely as I do now? After Shun Yu finished speaking, he thought about it. Adding up his 2 lifetimes, this period of time after entering the palace was the most comfortable period of his life. Shang Junlin considered everything for him. Other than him, there was no one else in the harem. The palace rules were like decorations in front of him. Unknowingly, he had already received so much preferential treatment. Thinking of this, Shun Yu's gaze gradually softened. Shang Junlin was Shang Junlin, the emperor of the Great Huan Sea. He wasn't the king of Yu or anyone else. A Yu promised me that if a Yu were to disappear one day, I would find a Yu no matter what. Shang Junlin left a trail of pecks on the side of Shun Yu's neck. In the past, he ascended the throne to protect himself. He developed the Great Huan Sea because it was his duty. He didn't want to be like the previous emperor, who caused the people to suffer because of his own selfish desires. What was the difference between him and the previous emperor that he had spurned? Now, he was very glad that he was the emperor of the Great Huan Sea. He had enough power to protect Shun Yu. In the future, he would work harder to develop the country. Only in this way could his Yu live more freely under his wings. After the excitement, the Minister of Works began to worry. Developing new things required a large amount of money. The Minister of Revenue was like a miser on this matter. The two of them argued a few times before the Minister of Works finally managed to get a sum of money. However, this could only solve the problem for a while. The Minister of Works sat in his seat with his brows tightly knitted. He was thinking of a way to get some money from the miser Minister of Revenue. Sir, are you still worried about the money? A subordinate walked in and asked when he saw the Minister of Works frowning. This kind of thing wasn't a secret in the Ministry of Works. Everyone knew that every time the minister wanted to do something new, there would be such a situation. Yes, it's enough for the early stages. What about the later stages? The Minister of Works frowned deeply. The subordinate's heart skipped a beat. He thought of the person he met 2 days ago and said tentatively, "What a coincidence, sir. In the past 2 days, a man who claimed to be Yang Zheng came looking for me. He said that the road was damaged because of him. He felt very sorry and wanted to make up for it. That road was indeed damaged by someone, but what does that have to do with Yang Zheng?" The Minister of Works wasn't easily persuaded. "Sir, why don't you meet him first? I can see that Yang Zheng's eyes are clear. He doesn't seem to have any bad intentions." "Of course, I'm not a good judge of character. Sir, you have to see for yourself," the subordinate advised. "We're working for Da Huan. How can we let the commoners pay for it?" The Minister of Works still didn't agree. "Sir, to tell you the truth, it was that young master who took the initiative to look for me. His manservant has been walking around here all this time. That young master Yang said that he came from the south to do business. That road was damaged because of his past grievances, and he would feel bad if he didn't do something. You can leave first." We'll talk about this later. After thinking about it, the Ministry of Works minister still went to ask some people. Indeed, it was as his subordinate had said. There was a young master called Yang Zheng who had been walking around the Ministry of Works recently. There were quite a few people who knew about this matter. The Ministry of Works minister dispelled half of his doubts and decided to meet him first. If it was really just to make up for the damaged road, he wouldn't have to be so thick-skinned as to argue with the Minister of Revenue. Yang Zheng waited for a few days in the newly bought courtyard. As expected, the people from the Ministry of Works came. What happened that day didn't seem fake. After talking for a while, both sides had a certain understanding of each other. After thinking about it, the Minister of Works still went to the palace. Do you still remember the people we met outside the palace last time? After returning to Yuzhong Palace, Shang Junlin pulled Shunyu to sit on the swing. The weather was gradually getting warmer. When the temperature was high in the afternoon, Shunyu liked to bask in the sun outside. His favorite was the swing that Shang Junlin had made for him. He sat on the swing with a book in his hand. He didn't need the palace servants to push him from behind. The swing swayed gently. The sunlight shone through the gaps between the leaves like naughty little elves jumping on the young man's body. With Shang Junlin around, Shunyu felt more relaxed sitting on the swing. Half of his body leaned on the man's body. He searched his memory and said, "Yang Zheng? It's him. He recently went to the Ministry of Works." Shang Junlin held Shunyu's slender fingers and bit them gently. Why did he go to the Ministry of Works? Shunyu didn't understand. He said it was to make up for the road that was damaged because of him. Shang Junlin's tone was a little careless when talking about this person. "Shunyu, is the Ministry of Works short of money?" Shang Junlin, as expected of a you. "You got the point immediately." Shunyu chuckled. If it wasn't for the lack of money, the Minister of Works wouldn't know about this person. A you is right. Recently, the Minister of Works has been arguing with the Ministry of Revenue for money. Shang Junlin also had a headache when it came to this matter. The Ministry of Revenue is in charge of the National Treasury. The Minister of Revenue and the Minister of Works have always been on bad terms. Every time the Ministry of Works wants to do something, they will make a scene. If they want to develop something new, it will require a lot of money. Shunyu was very clear about this. "I originally planned to give him a sum of money directly from my private treasury. Your Majesty, you can't." Before Shang Junlin could finish, Shunyu interrupted him. "If there's a first, there will be a second. Your Majesty can't always use your private treasury to support the Ministry of Works. I think you can accept Yang Zheng's funding." Shang Junlin stopped playing with Shunyu's fingers. "What do you mean? If it's taken from the people, it's used for the people. When the time comes, this cement will definitely be used on the people. If Yang Zheng took the initiative to ask for compensation, it's better to change the compensation to sponsorship. When the cement is used in the future, we can announce to the public that this is sponsored by Yang Zheng's industry. The Ministry of Works will have the money for research, and Yang Zheng's reputation will also be known. It can be said to be mutually beneficial." Shunyu had seen this method from that book. In the world before Shen Qingran transmigrated, business was very developed. Many merchants used this method to make their products famous. When more people knew about it, there would naturally be many buyers. Sponsorship. That's a good idea. Dahuan doesn't restrict merchants. Through this method, we can also control the merchants in Dahuan. A you is really creative. Shunyu recalled what the book said and continued, "The thing that merchants don't lack the least is money. However, merchants can't enter the imperial court as officials. If there's a special honor for them, I think they'll be very willing to exchange some money for it. Merchants value profits and reputation. Instead of letting a lot of money rot in their hands, it's better to give up a part of it in exchange for the imperial court's reputation. That way, it'll be much more convenient to do things outside." The more Shang Junlin thought about it, the more he felt that this method was good. He buried his face in Shunyu's hair and gently sniffed. His Ayu was really a treasure. She surprised him every moment. "As for the specifics, Your Majesty and the other ministers can discuss it. I just proposed a general idea." Whether it can be implemented or not depends on the situation in Dahuan. There's only one point. We can't let this method become a weapon for some people to fill their own pockets. Xinyu lowered her eyes. In her previous life, the King of Yu had also implemented this method. However, because of some people's greed, they completely changed their original intention. In the end, it led to the collapse of Dahuan's commerce. Even after Xinyu's rebirth, it still hadn't recovered. We know. This matter needs to be done slowly. Xinyu believed that Shang Junlin could do it well. To be honest, Shang Junlin's ability as a ruler was much stronger than the King of Yu. She didn't know what the person who wrote the book was thinking, letting the King of Yu ascend the throne. According to what Xinyu knew of her previous life, even if the King of Yu ascended the throne, Dahuan wouldn't be able to go far under his leadership. The inside was rotten, and there were strong enemies spying on the outside. On the surface, it seemed to be thriving, but in reality, it was a building on the verge of collapse. Xinyu nestled in Shang Junlin's arms and slowly yawned. Your Majesty, isn't the court examination time coming soon? That's right. Does you want to go with us to take a look? Shang Junlin gently stroked Xinyu's back and said in a gentle tone. He selfishly wanted Xinyu to go with him. Because of entering the palace, Xinyu lost the opportunity to take the imperial examination and become an official. Although Xinyu said that he didn't care, Shang Junlin still wanted to bring him to personally experience it. What identity do I have to go with? Disguise as a little eunuch serving your Majesty? Chapter 71. Shang Junlin imagined Xinyu wearing a little eunuch's uniform and following behind him. His eyes darkened. In the end, he couldn't bear it. I'll ask someone to set up a screen. You can sit behind it. Xinyu bumped into him. Does your Majesty want to take revenge on me for placing you behind the screen? At that time, Xinyu wanted to establish his authority in Yuzhong Palace, and Shang Junlin refused to go anywhere else. Xinyu had no choice but to ask someone to set up a big screen in the main hall and let Shang Junlin sit behind it. Am I so petty in your eyes? Shang Junlin pinched Xinyu's cheek. Xinyu muttered in a low voice, Your Majesty has used Shen Qingran's letter to me to take advantage of me a few times. Shang Junlin's ears were sharp, so he clearly heard this sentence. He pinched Xinyu's cheek and shook it from side to side. If you didn't refuse, why would I find these excuses? He wished that other men's names would never appear beside Xinyu's ears. Xinyu didn't want to admit this. He shook off Shang Junlin's hand. Your Majesty likes to torture people. How can you blame others? If Shang Junlin didn't push his luck again and again, would Xinyu have to find ways to refuse? Yes, it's all my fault. I didn't work hard enough and didn't make you comfortable. Shang Junlin let go of Xinyu's soft cheek and kissed the reddened part. Xinyu was rendered speechless by Shang Junlin's deliberate distortion of his meaning. He finally understood that he had no chance of winning against Shang Junlin in this matter. He sat up straight and patted Shang Junlin's shoulder to vent his anger. Your Majesty has worked very hard. Really, if you work harder, you can find someone else. She was already tormenting him to no end. What else did she want? You can't say such things carelessly. Shang Junlin forcefully held Xinyu's waist and pulled her into his arms. Then, he fiercely bit Xinyu's lips. Xinyu cried out in pain. Soon, he tasted the taste of blood in his mouth. Your Majesty. Jin doesn't like to hear such words. Shang Junlin released Xinyu's mouth and gently kissed away the blood on his lips. Jin's everything can only be yours. The man's aura was terrifying, like a storm that swept through everything. Xinyu, who was in the center of the whirlpool, could deeply feel Shang Junlin's mood at this moment. All right, Your Majesty, I'm just talking nonsense. Xinyu chased after Shang Junlin. When he was about to leave, she took the initiative to kiss his lips. Of course, Your Majesty is mine. No one can take Your Majesty away from me. Under the comfort of Xinyu, Shang Junlin's terrifying aura gradually calmed down. He didn't take back the initiative immediately. Instead, he enjoyed Xinyu's rare initiative. There was a faint fragrance on the young man's body. It was very light and could only be smelled when one was close to him. Shang Junlin liked this smell very much. Xinyu didn't go deep. Instead, he just rubbed his lips. His lips were still injured, so the faint taste of blood spread in their mouths. Feeling that Shang Junlin had calmed down, Shen Yu gradually withdrew. How could Shang Junlin let go of such a good opportunity? At the moment when they were about to separate, he moved his hand behind Shen Yu's head and used a little force. Shen Yu was forced to bump into him. Compared to before, Shang Junlin's kiss was much gentler this time. Although it was gentle, it had a strong force that couldn't be refused. Under the leafy tree, the man in black tightly held the blue-clothed young man in his arms. The shadows of the trees danced, and occasionally, a few birds circled above their heads. A breeze blew, and the branches and leaves swayed, causing waves of ripples. The mottled light fell on their heads and bodies. The swing gently swayed with their movements. It was a quiet afternoon, and everything was leisurely and beautiful. After being inspired by Shen Yu, Shang Junlin summoned the important ministers for a discussion. If Shen Yu's idea was to be implemented, the existing laws regarding merchants in Dahuan must be changed. After proposing Shen Yu's idea, the imperial study room fell into a long silence. After a long time, the prime minister hesitantly said, although this method is against common knowledge, the benefits far outweigh the disadvantages for Dahuan. I think it can be implemented. They're just merchants. Do you think the national treasury will be short of money? Compared to the previous dynasty, Dahuan already treats merchants very well. I don't think it's necessary to give them more preferential treatment. Your Majesty, it's not good for the country to encourage the merchants to be arrogant. Some ministers disagreed. The Minister of Works and the Minister of Revenue looked at each other. This time, they reached an agreement. Your Majesty, I think this method is feasible. I also agree. Merchants are also citizens of Dahuan. There's no reason to be too harsh on them. We just need to give them more honor and let them have a greater sense of belonging to Dahuan. After arguing back and forth, those who agreed with the idea gained the upper hand. I don't know who came up with this idea. Such a talented person shouldn't be buried. The Prime Minister had a good impression of the person who came up with this idea. Gui Jun accidentally mentioned it to me. Speaking of Shen Yu, Shang Junlin's expression softened at a speed visible to the naked eye. The Prime Minister wanted His Majesty to use the person who came up with this idea, but his words were stuck. Since ancient times, the harem couldn't interfere in politics. He sighed heavily in his heart. What a pity. The other ministers also didn't expect this answer. They looked at each other. For a moment, the hall was silent again. In the end, it was the Minister of Works who spoke up. Gui Jun is a talented person. It's Dahuan's good fortune to be able to receive his help. Shang Junlin had vaguely told him that Shen Yu was the one who came up with the cement recipe. At that time, the Minister of Works had a good impression of Shen Yu. Now that he saw him come up with a way to solve the Ministry of Work's biggest problem, his impression of him was even better. Shang Junlin's expression became gentler. First, come up with a plan for how this will be implemented. Before it is officially implemented, Shang Junlin paused. First, experiment with what the Ministry of Works is currently doing. Yes, Your Majesty. On the way out of the palace, several ministers gathered together to talk. It's really a pity for the child of Count North. In the past, there were rumors that he had deep thoughts. I don't know what Count North was thinking, sending his DI son into the palace. In that kind of situation, who didn't know that being sent into the palace was equivalent to being abandoned? The only DI son, Count North, was given up just like that. It was really an eye-opener. At that time, Count Shunbei favored his concubine and her child. Later, the child was involved in the matter of Prince Yu. In my opinion, the son of the first wife is the son of the first wife. Not any Tom, Dick, or Harry can climb to the head of the first wife. Count Shunbei favored his concubine and gave birth to a child, but did not care about the son of the first wife. That's right. Compared to his DI son, Shen Gui Jun is much more outstanding. I don't know if he regrets it now. What's the use of regretting it now? Did Count North regret it? Regret. He regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. After Shen Yu entered the palace, Shen Qingran repeatedly sought death and wiped out the last bit of father-son affection in Count Zhenbei's heart. He didn't know if it was Shen Yu's behavior that broke his filter of concubine mother Yu. Now, no matter how he looked at it, concubine mother Yu was an ordinary woman who couldn't be more ordinary. He even began to wonder if he, who was infatuated with concubine mother Yu, had been poisoned. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. After concubine Yu made trouble 2 more times, Count North was only fed up with her. At this time, he was in a terrible state to clean up the mess caused by Shen Qingran, so he impatiently locked concubine Yu up. Concubine Yu, who had been in the limelight for more than 10 years in Count North's mansion, fell down like this, which caused a lot of people in the mansion to sigh. What's wrong with this eldest young master? Once he makes a move, you will have no power to resist. A concubine who had stayed in the mansion for a long time sighed. Yes, a few months ago, who would have thought that concubine Yu, who was treated like a madam in the mansion, would have such a day? After all, she is just a concubine. She relied on Count North's favor to act like a tyrant. I have disliked her for a long time. A legitimate son is a legitimate son. She wants to help her son ascend the throne, but she doesn't know whether Dahuan's laws will allow it. Yes, some people are cheap and biased. If it wasn't for Madam, would she be where she is today? Be careful with your words. You can't mention that person. In the courtyard separated by a wall, concubine Yu clenched her fists tightly, her nails deeply sinking into her flesh. She knew that those people deliberately said it for her to hear. After being suppressed for more than 10 years, she had to seize the opportunity to hit someone when they were down. The news of Count North's mansion was passed to Shen Yu's ears through Mu Shi. Serves them right. Concubine Yu probably didn't expect that there would be a day when the wheel of fortune turns. After reporting the situation of Count North's mansion, Mu Shi was very relieved. However, young master, did you expect everything before you left the mansion? At that time, Mu Shi thought that Shen Yu handed the matter over to Count North to make things convenient for concubine Yu. Not only Mu Shi, but other people in the mansion also thought so at that time. After so many years, Count North's favoritism to concubine Yu was obvious to everyone in the mansion. Handing the matter over to Count North to handle was obviously giving Count North a chance to cover up someone. Shen Yu carelessly fiddled with Junling, which was growing better and better. I just let her know what kind of person Count North is. If I deal with concubine Yu, she will only hate me in her heart. What if the person who sent her to hell was Count North, who had always doted on her? She thought that she had walked into Duke Zhenbei's heart, but she didn't know that it was only because she didn't touch Duke Zhenbei's interests. You see, I didn't do anything in the palace, but she already knew how heartless Duke Zhenbei is. Young master, you are so thoughtful. Shen Yu chuckled and didn't say anything. Killing someone was just a matter of nodding his head. He had many ways to get rid of concubine Yu, but he didn't do it. What he wanted was to let concubine Yu see with her own eyes how hypocritical Duke Zhenbei was. She thought that her deep feelings were nothing in Duke Zhenbei's eyes. He could give her infinite love and let her do whatever she wanted in Duke Zhenbei's mansion, but he could also take back everything and let her be bullied by everyone. She was not worth mentioning in his heart. Her past glory was just a joke. Shen Yu wanted her to deny everything in the past. This made her feel much worse than him doing it himself. The Molan orchid sent by Shang Junlin had passed its flowering period. Shen Yu put the 2 pots of flowers together and looked at them carefully. Yu is taking care of these flowers again. Shang Junlin strode in and touched Shen Yu's face. Yu seems to be very happy today. Is it that obvious? Shen Yu touched his face, but forgot that his hand had just touched the mud. His white jade-like face was suddenly stained with mud. Shang Junlin lifted Shen Yu's chin and slowly wiped it for him. Yu, accompany me to the palace examination tomorrow. You don't have to disguise yourself as anyone, just follow me. What you have missed, we will make up for you one by one. Chapter 72. There's no need for that. Shen Yu refused without hesitation. He could already imagine the reactions of the officials if Shang Junlin openly brought him to the Great Hall. Shun Yu felt that for the sake of the hearts of the officials, it was better for him not to join in the fun. What is you worried about? Shang Junlin caressed Shun Yu's delicate neck. Are you worried that the officials will object? Don't worry, they won't say anything. Shun Yu finally understood that when Shang Junlin said that he wanted to bring him to the palace examination, it was not on a whim. Instead, he had already decided. He was a little confused. Why does your majesty insist on bringing me there? Have you forgotten that we still have a bet between us? Doesn't you want to see the results first? Shang Junlin coaxed in a low voice. Shun Yu glanced at him. Of course I didn't forget. Your Majesty has already asked for the bet in advance. It doesn't make much of a difference whether the results are good or not. Shun Yu thought of the scene that day and his face heated up. The beauty's eyes were shy and there was a light pink on her face. Shang Junlin's heart was moved. He leaned closer and kissed Yu. It's my selfishness to bring Yu. Take it that Yu is accompanying me, Ian? Your Majesty, Shun Yu tried to reason with him. Since ancient times, the imperial harem has never been allowed to interfere in politics. Your Majesty is already giving me preferential treatment by discussing the matters of the imperial court with me. The court examination is not like other things. No matter how you look at it, as a noble, I shouldn't set foot in it. Husband and wife are one. You and I should not be separated. You can do anything and go anywhere that I can. Shang Junlin intimately rubbed Shun Yu's cheek. I know that Yu is very talented. It's unfair for you to be trapped in the harem. I can't accept it because I'm covering up Yu's talent. Shun Yu was stunned. He didn't expect Shang Junlin to say such words. His heart ached, and an imperceptible sweetness slowly rose. He opened his mouth, and his voice was inexplicably bitter. I don't care about these things. Your Majesty, you don't have to do this for me. Shang Junlin held her tightly in his arms. Just take it as satisfying my selfish desires, Yu. His Yu should have been an eagle soaring in the sky, but because of him, because of Duke Zhenbei's stupidity, it was trapped in the harem. Because of his selfishness, he did not want to let go. His Yu could only stand by his side and could only belong to him. Shun Yu had no choice but to agree. Shang Junlin happily hugged her and whispered, Actually, it's very boring to sit on the throne. You can't do anything for more than 2 hours. Shun Yu touched the man's drooping hair. So, Your Majesty, you want me to accompany you to relieve your boredom? You can think of it this way. Shun Yu chuckled and held the man's face with both hands. Your Majesty, you don't have to feel that you're holding me back. It's my own choice to enter the harem. No one forced me. I'm very happy that Your Majesty treats me so well. Your Majesty, you don't have to think of letting me go to the imperial court to show off my skills. I don't like it. Shun Yu stared straight into Shang Junlin's eyes as if he wanted to see into his heart. He emphasized again, what I like is to be free and unrestrained, not to be endlessly deceived, Your Majesty. When he was with Shang Junlin, he experienced peace. It didn't matter if he was selfish or cowardly. He was really tired of the feeling of having to carefully calculate every step he took and every word he said in his previous life. When he first entered the harem, he didn't plan to stay for long. It was Shang Junlin who showed him another way of life. So this is what it feels like to have someone to shelter you from the wind and rain. Shang Junlin's eyes darkened. After a while, he suddenly laughed. You, even if you want to, I won't give you the chance to escape from me. His you. Since she was in front of him, she would never be able to leave his side. The news that Shang Junlin wanted to bring Shun Yu to the court examination was discussed in advance with the ministers present. A few of them knew Shang Junlin's temper very well and didn't raise any objections. They calmly accepted this matter. A few others who were dissatisfied naturally didn't dare to speak up when they saw that the Prime Minister and the others didn't say anything. After that, someone was puzzled. Even if His Majesty dotes on His Highness, there should be a limit. How can he bring His Highness to the court examination? Yes. Why didn't you persuade His Majesty and let him do as he pleases? The Prime Minister slowly tidied up his sleeves and answered without raising his head, Do you think His Majesty is asking for our opinions when he is talking to us? A few of them thought about it and their faces turned ugly. Obviously, you know that. No, His Majesty has already made up his mind. If we oppose him, it will only make His Majesty unhappy. What can we do? But, since ancient times, the harem is not allowed to interfere in politics. Shouldn't His Highness avoid suspicion on such an important occasion? The Prime Minister thought of the young man who proposed the new commercial law and the flood control method. He sighed. His Majesty has his reasons for doing this. We don't need to worry about it. If it weren't for Count Bay's muddle-headedness and being trapped in the harem, the young man would have been able to shine in the court. Seeing that the Prime Minister was firmly on His Majesty's side, the officials had no choice but to shut their mouths. They would never dare to talk to His Majesty about this. The students who failed the metropolitan examination had left the capital one after another. They either found a job or returned to their hometowns to prepare for the examination. They would take the examination again in 3 years. Jiang Huiqing and He Chengyu were the top few students in the metropolitan examination. After dealing with all the guests, they went into seclusion to prepare for the court examination. Yingxing Tower also quieted down for a while. After the Minister of Works received His Majesty's permission, he sent someone to find Yang Zheng to discuss the sponsorship. After hearing what the person from the Ministry of Works said, Yang Zheng put away his fan. This method is too beneficial for us businessmen. I didn't expect to get such a great benefit. Young Master Yang, you don't have to say that. If it weren't for your kindness, we would still have to worry. The person who came had a good impression of Yang Zheng and spoke with a hint of intimacy. As they exchanged cups, the atmosphere became more and more lively. Yang Zheng had been a businessman for many years and was able to twist black into white. The person from the Ministry of Works had never seen such a scene. After a few words, he was able to get a lot of information out of him. However, Yang Zheng was used to being strict. He only asked about trivial matters. Even if the person sobered up, he wouldn't think that there was anything wrong with what he said. Did His Majesty come up with the idea of sponsorship? Yang Zheng looked up. The servant beside him hurriedly poured wine for the two of them. The wine was of the highest quality. It tasted fresh and fragrant. It was a good choice for welcoming guests. The person from the Ministry of Works was already a little drunk, but his mind was still clear. He knew what to say and what not to say. He lowered his voice and reminded Yang Zheng, the higher-ups may be making a big move. Young Master Yang, you have to seize the opportunity. After getting the information he wanted, Yang Zheng knew when to stop and naturally changed the topic. Seeing that he didn't ask any more questions, the person from the Ministry of Works was relieved. He became more satisfied and thought to himself, he knows how to behave. He's someone we can cooperate with for a long time. Late at night, Yang Zheng sent someone to send the person from the Ministry of Works away. He stood by the roadside and watched the carriage go away. His eyes were obscure. Young Master, you can go in. The servant brought a cloak and put it on Yang Zheng. I made the right decision to come to the capital. Yang Zheng chuckled. The servant didn't understand. Young Master, what are you talking about? Those people probably didn't expect it. They thought that they were banishing me, but they didn't expect that they would give me a path to heaven. Compared to what they are about to get, what is the treasure they are guarding? Fortune and misfortune really depended on each other. He originally thought that he would need to spend more effort, but now that an opportunity had come knocking on his door, the time needed to achieve his goal would be greatly reduced. Yang Zheng didn't sleep for the whole night. He was readjusting his plan. He had to make good use of the help that fell from the sky. Young Master. The servant came in with a bowl of hot porridge. I've inquired about the people you asked me to. It's very strange. I couldn't find any information about them. After parting ways with Shang Junlin and Shen Yu that day, Yang Zheng sent someone to inquire about the two people. It wasn't that he wanted to do anything, but he simply wanted to get to know them. There were really too few people who were extraordinary in conversation and had perfect looks. Not to mention other things, it would be good if he could make friends with them. One of the main principles of a businessman was to make as many friends as possible. Oh! Yang Zheng stopped writing. You couldn't find anything? What about the other family? I've asked carefully. The other family should be Lord Fang and his family. As for the two people that young master is looking for, I really couldn't find any clues. I understand. Ask your men to come back. Don't look for them anymore. Pretend that this never happened in the future. Lord Fang was the favorite person of the emperor. Yang Zheng had paid attention to him that day. Although he tried to hide it, from his actions, it didn't seem like he was pretending to be respectful towards the two people that he was looking for. How many people could make Lord Fang treat them with such respect? Yang Zheng smiled. That was why it was said that his luck was unparalleled. Yang Zheng's actions couldn't be hidden from the hidden dragon guards. Not long after, Shang Junlin received the news. However, the court examination was about to start and this matter could only be dealt with later. Shen Yu woke up early and changed into a more formal outfit. Shang Junlin was still wearing the emperor's ceremonial robe. It was black and had golden embroidery on it. There was no cover or screen. Shang Junlin held Shen Yu's hand and sat on the high seat. The officials were informed in advance. When they saw the two of them sitting together, they looked forward and prepared to start. After the candidates bowed to the emperor, they lowered their heads and sat down one by one. Under the rule of not looking at the emperor directly, no one dared to look up. The court examination didn't just test one's knowledge. It also tested one's mental endurance. Shen Yu sat on the high seat and the reactions of the candidates were obvious. Some of them were obviously nervous. In fact, most of them were nervous. Shen Yu looked around. He Chengyu and Jiang Huiqing were in a good state. They were writing their answers in an orderly manner. The other person who was acting differently was Fang Jiari. Fang Jiari was wearing the uniform of a student. Her back was straight and she was concentrating on the answers in front of her. Time passed slowly. Finally, it was time. The candidates stopped writing and someone came forward to collect the answers. Everything was about to come to an end. Those who didn't perform well were already pale. The candidates entered the side hall to wait. The officials picked up the answers and flipped through the answers. Without exception, the new bloodline of the imperial court would be born here. After sitting for more than 2 hours, Shen Yu stood up and stretched his arms and legs. When he thought about how the officials looked at him a few times, Shen Yu felt happy. You, how do you feel? Shang Junlin walked down the stairs with her in his arms. Your Majesty is right. These 2 hours were really hard to endure. He couldn't make any big movements or speak. Shen Yu felt that he shouldn't have agreed to Shang Junlin's request. However, Your Majesty, do you think Jiang Huiqing and the others will be surprised when they see us? Chapter 73. Yu has corresponded with Jiang Huiqing so many times. Did he not suspect our identities at all? Shang Junlin asked. Your Majesty has read most of those letters. Does Your Majesty not know? Shen Yu glanced at him. Originally, Shang Junlin didn't care about these things. He wouldn't ask Shen Yu about anything. At first, he didn't think it was necessary. As long as he was sure that Shen Yu didn't have the intention to harm Da Huan, he wouldn't care. Later, he was moved and didn't want to pry into Shen Yu's personal space. He gave him enough respect. He cared about Jiang Huiqing's letters because he was jealous. Shen Yu was annoyed by Shang Junlin several times with this excuse. He simply read the letters together with him every time, so that he wouldn't torment him with all kinds of reasons. Shang Junlin didn't feel embarrassed at being discovered. He intimately moved closer to Shen Yu's ear and said, You wanted to read the letters with me. You can't blame me. From time to time, the ministers restrained themselves and looked at him. Shen Yu wasn't in the mood to show off his intimate relationship with Shang Junlin in front of the ministers. He nudged him and said, he probably doesn't know. If he had known, he wouldn't have written to him as frequently as before, and he definitely wouldn't have used the tone of an old friend. Although the current Jiang Huiqing was younger than in his previous life, some things that were engraved in his bones wouldn't change. Or maybe he doesn't want to think about it. Shen Yu thought for a while and added, the loophole of us leaving the palace is actually quite big. If he thinks about it deeply, he might be able to guess our identities. Yu is right. For example, He Changyu, who is beside him, should have already guessed our identities. Under Shunyu's hint, Shang Junlin loosened his arms around Shunyu's waist. Shang Junlin's cold eyes swept across the hall. The ministers who were deliberately looked at were frightened and lowered their heads. They didn't dare to look at him again. Shunyu breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, no one was looking at him from time to time. He Changyu. As the legitimate son of the He family, one of the top aristocratic families in Jiangnan, it's not surprising that he has such insight. Shunyu had already learned about He Changyu's family background from Shang Junlin. He was not surprised that his and Shang Junlin's identities had been guessed. The graders would not be able to see the names of the candidates. Even Shang Junlin would not know which candidate had answered which paper before the final results were out. The exam results for Da Huan were released on the same day, and the grading officials were already prepared before the exam started. After the examinees left, they immediately started grading. During this period of time, the examinees were arranged to stay in a special side hall. The palace had prepared meals, and they were all top-notch delicacies. It could be considered a special reward for the examinees who had reached this step. Not everyone could enjoy the imperial cuisine of the palace. The side hall was spacious enough. Before the results were out, the examinees could rest as they wished. However, at this time, not many people could relax and enjoy themselves. Jiang Huiqing stretched his limbs and walked to He Changyu's side. "Brother Changyu, why do you not look nervous at all?" Almost everyone in the hall was restless. There were many delicious dishes on the table, but they couldn't alleviate the anxiety in their hearts. There were only a few who could sit down and enjoy the delicious food. He Changyu was one. As for the other, Jiang Huiqing stared at the person for a while, his eyes widening. He nudged He Changyu with his elbow and said in a low voice, "Brother Changyu, look over there." He Changyu followed his gaze and couldn't help but pause. "Isn't this?" Jiang Huiqing nodded vigorously. The curiosity in his heart almost overflowed. "It's really her. Why is she here? And dressed like this?" Jiang Huiqing saw that it was Fang Jiari, the daughter of the Fang family. Because of Shun Yu and Shang Junlin, Jiang Huiqing and Fang Jiari could be considered acquaintances. Since the last time they parted, they hadn't seen each other again. He never thought that they would meet again under such circumstances. Could it be that they are brothers? Jiang Huiqing shook his head. He felt that it didn't seem like it. Feeling someone's gaze, Fang Jiari turned her head and saw a familiar face. She paused for a moment, then stood up and walked over. "Brother Jiang, brother He." Although the voice was deliberately lowered, it wasn't difficult for Jiang Huiqing to recognize that it was Fang Jiari's voice. "Fang." He originally wanted to say Miss Fang, but felt that it wasn't appropriate and changed the way he addressed her. "Young Master Fang?" "That's me." Fang Jiari admitted directly and sat across the two of them. His guess was confirmed. Jiang Huiqing was dumbfounded. He turned to look at He Changyu and saw that there was an imperceptible crack on the man's face. He slowly calmed down. Anyway, he wasn't the only one who was surprised. Jiang Huiqing threw the question to the back of his mind and chatted with Fang Jiari in high spirits. They had a brief contact before. Jiang Huiqing liked Fang Jiari's decisive style, especially when dealing with the matter of Prince Yu. She didn't hesitate and defended the victim with reason and evidence. How many men could have such courage? This wasn't the place to get to the bottom of the matter. Jiang Huiqing wasn't the kind of person who would ask until the end of the matter. They skipped the topic that couldn't be discussed and chatted happily. He Changyu occasionally added a few words. The three of them looked happy and harmonious. The little eunuch who was serving in the side hall saw everything. It didn't take long for the news to reach Shang Junlin's ears. At that time, Shang Junlin was looking at the selected excellent answer sheets. Shun Yu was sitting next to him and looking with him. Eunuch Meng came over and reported the news in a low voice. The three of them actually got together. Shun Yu thought it was quite interesting. Yes, Eunuch Meng's eyes were smiling. The three of them talked happily and the atmosphere was very harmonious. Jiang Huiqing and He Changyu recognized Miss Fang's female identity. Shun Yu stood up and asked. Eunuch Meng answered every question, replying to your highness, it seems that they recognized her. Jiang Huiqing's expression changed greatly at that time, but he recovered in an instant. He must have recognized her. He Chungyu's expression didn't change much. Is your majesty going to directly announce Miss Fang's identity later? No matter what Fang Jiuri's final results were, entering the court exam meant that she was half a step into the official career. To enter the court, one's identity had to be carefully checked. Shang Junlin could help her cover it up a few times before. This time, even the emperor couldn't cover it up. They sat a certain distance away from the other officials. If they lowered their voices, they wouldn't be heard. When the final results are out, it will definitely be announced. Her original intention was to enter the officialdom as a woman. Shang Junlin didn't hide his intentions. I can already foresee the commotion in the court in the coming days. Not just in the court. When the time came, there would probably be several piles of impeachment reports. However, there really isn't a need to confine a woman to the inner residence. There are many things a woman can do. Shun Yu would never forget that he had glimpsed a glimpse of the future from that book. Just a glimpse was enough to make one's heart tremble. It was hard to imagine what it would be like to live in that era. They will have to change their views eventually. Not only will women enter the court as officials, but there will also be new laws regarding merchants. Perhaps there will be more changes in the future. If they are unwilling to accept it, then we can just replace them. What I want is never an official who follows the rules. Shang Junlin's nature was filled with killing intent. He spent all of his childhood and part of his youth on the battlefield. This caused his style of doing things to lean towards attacking rather than defending, whether it was in governing the country or when he faced Shun Yu. Shun Yu rested his chin on his hand as he looked at Shang Junlin. At this moment, he could clearly feel that Shang Junlin was the emperor of Da Huan. He was the ruler of a country that couldn't be disobeyed. When Shang Junlin was in front of him, he would always deliberately restrain his aggressive nature. Shun Yu suddenly realized that he didn't dislike Shang Junlin as much as he had imagined. Why are you looking at me like that? Shang Junlin stroked Shun Yu's hair. I feel that your majesty looks very good today. Shun Yu replied with a smile. Shang Junlin laughed. No matter how good I look, I can't compare to a you. While the two were talking, the officials had already discussed the general results. Your Majesty, I think that this answer is enough to be the champion. I think this answer is more promising. Seeing that they were about to quarrel again, Shang Junlin said, Tell me your reasons. The answer in my hand is wide open and deep inside. Shun Yu listened as he flipped through the answers with Shang Junlin. These 3 answer sheets were explained from different angles and each had their own characteristics. At first glance, they were not inferior to each other. Shun Yu saw familiar handwriting and took that answer sheet and read it carefully. He looked at the other 2 answer sheets carefully and vaguely had an answer in his heart. After a reasonable discussion, everyone had a general result in their hearts. The Prime Minister picked up one of the answers and stood out. I think that this person should be the champion. This time, no one objected. The final result was the same as Shun Yu's thought. Without returning to the court examination, the top 3 were the most difficult to determine. After these 3 were determined, the rest of the results were more or less confirmed. At this time, the officials would know who each answer sheet corresponded to. As expected, the first place was He Chungyu. Jiang Huiqing was third. When the second name list came out, it was beyond everyone's expectations. Immediately, an official knelt down. Your Majesty, you can't. Oh. You chose this person after discussion. What do you mean by saying that you can't? Shang Junlin sat on the high seat and looked at the people kneeling below. This person disguised herself as a man to participate in the imperial examination. This is the crime of deceiving the emperor. Deceiving the emperor? How come I don't know how she deceives the emperor? Official Ming, if I remember correctly, 15 minutes ago, you were arguing about whether this essay was qualified to be the champion. That's because I didn't know that it was written by a woman. As a woman, she can write such a beautiful essay. Does Official Ming want to deny the excellence of the essay just because she is a woman? Shun Yu asked. That's not what I meant. However, this essay was the one he thought the most highly. He could not refute it even if he wanted to. Denying the excellence of the essay was the same as denying his own judgment. Looking at the emperor's expression, it was obvious that he already knew about this. Official Ming sighed and retreated to the side. After the results were out, the candidates had to meet the emperor again and kowtow to express their gratitude at the same time. Jiang Huiqing followed a group of students into the main hall. His results in the metropolitan examination were the best, so he stood at the front. After listening to Eunuch Meng's instructions and kowtowing, a steady voice came from above. "Rise." This voice gave Jiang Huiqing an inexplicably familiar feeling. He boldly took the opportunity to look up. Chapter 74. When he saw the two people standing in front of him, Jiang Huiqing's current mood could be described with the words heaven and earth turned upside down. A man in a black imperial robe and a young man in blue stood side by side. He wasn't completely familiar with their faces, but their aura couldn't lie. Even though their faces had changed a bit, Jiang Huiqing still recognized them. Brother Lin, Brother Yu. Jiang Huiqing's mind was numb. If it weren't for the person next to him quietly pulling on his clothes, he probably would have lost his composure in front of the emperor. With difficulty, Jiang Huiqing followed the students and bowed. When the rankings were announced, his thoughts once again drifted away. It turned out that Brother Lin and Brother Yu were the current emperor and Shen Guijun. For some unknown reason, the two of them concealed their identities and left the palace, and just happened to meet them at Yingxing Tower. Jiang Huiqing recalled his actions these past few days and just wanted to facepalm. He was worried about Brother Yu, oh no, worried about Guijuan's situation in her husband's family, interrupting His Majesty and Guijuan's intimacy, and frequently writing letters to Guijun. Look at what he had done. He actually wrote in the letter that someone had asked him to cheat, and the matter of him cheating was smoothly resolved. He had thought that the two of them were at most officials, but never would he have thought that these two people were the pinnacle of power in Da Huan. There were also some other things. For example, in Guijuan's letters to him, she jokingly said that because he frequently wrote letters, her husband was jealous. What did he do at that time? He spent most of the letters ridiculing Brother Lin, no, His Majesty's behavior. Because he was more and more familiar with them, the tone of his letters became more and more casual. If he knew that these letters would eventually be sent to the imperial palace, he wouldn't have written those things. No, he wouldn't have written letters so frequently. After all the rankings were announced, Shang Junlin opened his mouth to say some words of encouragement and warning. Shun Yu stood above and watched Jiang Huiqing's expression change again and again. It seemed that he had recognized their identities. Shun Yu was amused. This time, Jiang Huiqing must have received quite a shock. Jiang Huiqing was absent-minded throughout the whole process, until Shang Junlin mentioned Fang Jiao's name. Among the candidates this time, there is one with a rather special identity. She is our newly crowned bannerman, Fang Jiao, the daughter of Lord Fang Jun. This is the first time in the history of the Great Huan dynasty that a woman has achieved such outstanding results. What? The second place was a woman? As soon as Shang Junlin finished speaking, there was a commotion below. Shang Junlin did not pay attention to these people. He left behind the top three of the first rank and sent the others out of the palace. The officials wanted to say something but stopped themselves. Due to Shang Junlin's attitude, they couldn't say anything and followed the examinees out of the hall. Several people gathered together and discussed in low voices. This, since ancient times, there has never been a precedent of a woman becoming an official. Are we going to let His Majesty do as he pleases? The results were chosen by everyone. What's the point of saying this now? Are we going to strike off her rightful ranking because of her identity as a woman? But Fang Jiao disguised herself as a man and entered the examination hall. This is against the rules. Rules? Do you really think that a woman like her has the ability to hide from everyone who is searching her body? So what if she is Lord Fang's beloved daughter? Prime Minister, you mean, from the beginning, His Majesty has tacitly approved of this? What else? Look at His Majesty today. Did he even show a trace of surprise? Then, are we going to let a woman become an official in the court? This matter will take a long time. Only a few of us know about it now. When the results are announced, all the officials will know about it. Not only that, all the scholars in the world will know. His Majesty will have to deal with these officials who oppose him. The Prime Minister smoothed out the creases on his sleeves and said lightly, "Do you think His Majesty will care about what those people think? Since His Majesty has made a decision, how many times has he changed it because of the opposition of others? Prime Minister, are you going to let His Majesty do as he pleases?" Some of the officials were dissatisfied. "Sir, don't flatter me. I don't have that much ability. I just want to remind you that instead of thinking of ways to oppose His Majesty, it is better to convince yourselves to accept the established facts." As long as it was someone who could truly work for the Great Huan dynasty, the Prime Minister didn't care about the other party's background, gender, and other external conditions. He was really fed up with people who occupied positions but didn't do anything. This greatly increased his workload. In the hall, other than Jiang Huiqing, who was still out of sorts, the other two people had complicated feelings. Guessing the identities of the two people was one thing, but facing the truth was another. He Chengyu was a bit absent-minded. He and Shenyu, Shang Junlin didn't interact as much as Jiang Huiqing, but in these few interactions, Shang Junlin's image was far too different from the rumored image of the Great Huan dynasty's emperor. Everyone knew that the current emperor of the Great Huan dynasty fought his way out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. He used ruthless methods to force his way to the throne. Although his methods were criticized by many aristocratic families, because of his contributions to the Great Huan dynasty, he still had a good reputation in the hearts of ordinary people. He Chengyu understood that Shang Junlin was ruthless, decisive, and would never go back on his word. The young Master Lin he knew listened to almost everything his wife said. Other than not liking to talk, he didn't have a temper. No matter how he looked at it, he couldn't connect the two together. However, such two distinct personalities appeared in the same person. Fang Jiao's mood was also very complicated at the moment. Among the complicated feelings, there was also a trace of confusion. She knew that the path she had chosen would be difficult to walk. She had also prepared herself for a difficult struggle, but she didn't expect that the first step would be completed so easily. After a moment of silence, Shenyu said, "Eunuch Meng, bring a seat for our freshly selected top 3. Eunuch Meng accepted the order and left. After a while, there were 3 more chairs in the main hall. Shenyu pulled Shang Junlin to sit down. "I don't need to say anything. Presumably, you have already guessed my and His Majesty's identities. It is indeed as you have guessed. When I left the palace, I didn't expect to meet the future top scorer and 3rd place." This sentence confirmed Jiang Huiqing's conjecture in He Chengyu's heart. "I hope you don't blame us for hiding it." Under Shenyu's mediation, the atmosphere was finally not as stiff as it was at the beginning. He Chengyu had already expected this and quickly adjusted his state of mind. Jiang Huiqing spent some time digesting the information and forced himself to calm down. Shenyu knew that with his and Shang Junlin's current identities, it would be difficult for Jiang Huiqing and He Chengyu to return to the way they used to be. He didn't force them to stay because of this matter. A lot of things happened during this imperial examination. Now that the results are out, I'm afraid it won't be peaceful. I just want to tell you that the results you obtained now are what you deserve. No matter what happens in the future, I hope you can maintain your original intentions. Shang Junlin didn't say it clearly, but everyone present knew what he was talking about. First, there was the matter of cheating. Jiang Huiqing was involved. Then, Fang Jiaoyi, a woman, got 2nd place in the imperial examination. In the future, there would be trouble in the imperial court. We will remember your teachings. The 3 stood up and bowed respectfully. This was Shang Junlin's home ground. Shenyu didn't say much. Shang Junlin said a few words and let them leave. After leaving the imperial palace, Jiang Huiqing let out a long sigh of relief. Fang Jiaoyi wanted to return home. After leaving the palace, she said goodbye to the 2. Jiang Huiqing and He Chengyu went back to Yingxing Tower. In the carriage, Jiang Huiqing felt that something was wrong. He elbowed He Chengyu and asked, "Brother Chengyu, did you already know?" "Know what?" He Chengyu, who was resting with his eyes closed, opened his eyes. You knew about Brother Lin and Brother Yu's true identities. I was shocked at the time, but you seem to have expected it. Jiang Huiqing lowered his voice. I guessed a little, but I only confirmed it today. He Chengyu didn't hide it. You should have warned me. Jiang Huiqing wailed and collapsed on the carriage. Look at what I've done these days. And those letters. God, I must have eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's guts to write such things in the letters. He Chengyu helped him up. His Majesty and Gui Jun didn't say anything. Besides, you didn't know their true identities at the time. After you wrote the letters, Gui Jun replied to you. It's okay. Did you know? Jiang Huiqing's eyes were dull. At the time, I only thought that Gui Jun had married into an aristocratic family. I even wrote a lot of ways to deal with the relationship between clansmen in the letter. I also wrote some ways to make Brother Lin and him stand on the same side. Thinking of that scene, He Chengyu couldn't help but laugh. He patted Jiang Huiqing's shoulder. Just be careful in the future. His Majesty and Gui Jun are magnanimous and won't make a fuss. It wasn't a matter of whether His Majesty and Gui Jun would make a fuss or not. As long as he thought of what he had done these days, Jiang Huiqing felt like he had nothing left to live for. They rode in a carriage sent by the palace. As soon as they arrived at the entrance of Yingxing Tower, the shopkeeper of Yingxing Tower led people to greet them. They were the new top scorer and third runner-up. They were both guests of Yingxing Tower. How glorious it would be if word got out. Amidst the crowd's congratulations, the two got off the carriage. Yingxing Tower set up a small banquet for the two of them and waited for the two hosts to arrive. Fang Jiari was also sent back to the Fang family by the palace's carriage. Master Fang and Madame Fang went out to welcome her. Looking at his daughter in her school uniform, Master Fang felt a faint sense of pride. Even if he only had one daughter, so what? She wasn't inferior to any man in the world. Father. Good child. Master Fang rubbed his daughter's head. The family is ready. Since you've achieved such good results, don't worry about anything else. Father will take care of it. His daughter had achieved such excellent results. It was easy to imagine what kind of shock it would cause when those old-fashioned aristocratic officials found out. His Majesty will have a headache at court tomorrow. Under the pavilion, Xunyu poured a cup of tea for the man sitting opposite him. Shang Junlin took the cup and drank it. The day I agreed to Fang Jiari's daughter, I knew what the consequences would be. It's a foregone conclusion. No matter how much they make a fuss, it won't change anything. His Majesty deliberately announced the results earlier this year because he knew they would make a fuss. In Xunyu's impression, the results of the court examinations were usually announced within 1 to 3 days. This year, Shang Junlin directly announced the results on the same day. Presumably, he wanted to announce the results to the world before anyone could react. Yu is right. You don't have to worry about the Prime Minister. Those aristocratic officials probably won't accept the results easily. Shang Junlin grasped Xunyu's wrist. Their people didn't get a single first place this time. He Chengyu comes from an aristocratic family, but the He family doesn't have much interaction with the aristocratic families in the capital. Xunyu smiled. They probably didn't expect the results to be like this. Shang Junlin rubbed Xunyu's wrist. His eyes darkened. Yu, I've won again. Chapter 75. Your Majesty, you said last time that I'll be the winner this time. Didn't Your Majesty take away your winnings? Thinking of that kiss and everything that happened afterward, Xunyu's face blushed. The skin on the inner side of his wrist was rubbed by the calloused fingertips, and the numbness spread along the skin and snaked up. Shang Junlin stared at Xunyu, and his eyes became deeper and deeper. I did say that, but this time I want to. Will you give it to me? Xunyu felt like his wrist was on fire, burning from the outside to the inside. He tried to withdraw his hand, but was stopped by the man. Shang Junlin didn't use much strength to hold his arm, but it was just enough for him to break free. Xunyu tried a few times, but he couldn't withdraw his hand. The man held his hand, raised it up, and lowered his head slightly. A soft kiss fell on the back of Xunyu's hand. Xunyu's fingers curled up slightly as if they were scalded. Shang Junlin didn't let go of his hand. He kissed the back of his hand intimately and fell on his fingers. His thin lips were slightly open. Shen Yu only felt a wet and warm sensation on his fingers. He wanted to withdraw his fingers, but the man forcefully restrained his movements. His fingertips were densely bitten. The man's gaze fell on his body. It didn't seem like he was biting his fingers, but rather tasting something delicious. Your Majesty, let go of me. It's dirty. Shen Yu turned his head to avoid the man's gaze. His blood-red earlobe was exposed in front of the man. Shang Junlin's Adam's apple bobbed, and the fire in his eyes gradually burned. I want to kiss you. A vague voice sounded. Shen Yu's eyelashes trembled, and he lowered his head and didn't speak. Shang Junlin chuckled. The tip of his tongue circled around his finger, leaving a wet trace. Shen Yu looked to the other side. He didn't know when his hand was released. The man walked behind him and leaned over to his ear. Let me kiss you, okay? Although it was a question, Shang Junlin did not intend to listen to Shen Yu's reply. He moved closer to Shen Yu's ear and opened his mouth slightly. The ripe red fruit was placed into his mouth, and he gently rubbed it with his teeth. The fruit was too tender, and the owner was afraid that it would be damaged, so he didn't dare to use too much strength. Shen Yu trembled all over when his earlobe was touched like this. All of his senses were covered with a layer of fog. He suddenly felt that everything was unreal. Only the places that were touched could feel everything clearly. Unknowingly, Shen Yu was sitting in the man's arms. Her increasingly red earlobes were released and turned to the side of her neck. Following her delicate jawline, it finally fell to her lips. Attacking cities and seizing territories. Large peach blossoms bloomed before his eyes, white with a hint of pink, slowly filling his line of sight. His slender and fair fingers clutched his black robe tightly, leaving creases behind. The sun was setting in the west, and the orange light surrounded the two of them, giving them a hazy golden edge. Occasionally, there were a few soft whimpers, but they were blown away by the wind before they could reach their ears. Eunuch Meng led the palace servants to stand in the distance. He tactfully lowered his head, not daring to look. As expected by Shang Junlin, the next morning, there was an uproar because of Fang Jiao's matter. Even the fact that Shang Junlin brought Shen Yu to the palace examination was selectively ignored. In the eyes of the aristocratic officials, breaking the ancestral rule to recruit women as officials was much more serious than other matters. Your Majesty, you can't do this. There has been no precedent since ancient times. Miss Fang hid her identity to participate in the imperial examination. This is the crime of deceiving the emperor. Your Majesty, you can't set a precedent like this. If all the women in the world follow suit, wouldn't it be a mess? Someone who had seen Fang Jiao's answer sheet yesterday retorted, not all women can be so talented. So what? Since ancient times, which dynasty has a woman entered the imperial court as an official? Women should be content with their lot, obediently stay in the backyard to serve their parents-in-law, and have children. Lord Zhao, you are wrong. There are many capable women. How can you say such prejudiced words? Lord Zhao's neck stiffened. Am I wrong? If they were all content with their lot, how could today's incident happen? The argument in the front hall was endless, and Shang Junlin didn't say anything. Shen Yu shook the cup in his hand and said to Mu Shi, who was next to him, "You see, these people have nothing to say. They can only use the crime of deceiving the emperor as an excuse. They can't wait for your Majesty to immediately execute this deviant woman." Shen Yu deliberately got up early today and waited for Shang Junlin in the back hall. He was also very curious to see what would happen in the morning court. Mu Shi heard the voices from the front hall and felt indignant. Why do they think that women are born to stay in the backyard and have children for men? That's why your Majesty is right. Some of the ministers in the imperial court should be replaced. They were short-sighted and only knew how to form cliques and pursue personal interests. Keeping them would only be a waste of their salary. The argument in the front hall continued. Some of the officials, led by the Prime Minister, agreed with Fang Jiao's results, although they felt that the matter of letting women enter the imperial court as officials was debatable. The remaining members of the Qian family also stood on the Prime Minister's side. After the incident with Prince Li, Shang Junlin took the opportunity to promote many of his own people. The imperial court had changed a lot. A group of veteran officials, led by the aristocratic families, refused to budge. Not only did none of the aristocratic family's descendants enter the top 3, but a woman even took a spot. How could they accept this? Another reason was that their people happened to be in 4th place this time. If Fang Jiari was removed, their people would be able to take a spot in the top 3, and they would not lose too much face. Shang Junlin clearly knew what the aristocratic families were thinking. Seeing that they were about to quarrel with Yu Lai, he interrupted, "Look at all of you, all red in the face. You don't look like important officials at all." The main hall quieted down. "Meng Chang, show them the 2nd place answers. You all said that women should not be officials. Why don't you take a look at the woman's essay before you speak?" Eunuch Meng led the young eunuchs to distribute the prepared essays one by one. After reading, some of the officials who had objected to Fang Jiari's essay because of her identity as a woman lowered their heads in shame. Those who could keep their positions under Shang Junlin's rule were all knowledgeable. They could tell that the essay was well written. Some of the officials who did not want to admit that women were better than men changed their expressions, especially Lord Zhao, who wanted to belittle Fang Jiari. His face turned green and then white. No matter how much prejudice he had against women, he had to admit that the article in his hand was extremely well written. If he hadn't known beforehand that it was written by a woman, he wouldn't have dared to believe that such an article was written by a woman. Does anyone have anything to say now? Shang Junlin looked at the people below calmly. The officials lowered their heads and did not say anything. The Prime Minister was the first to stand out. "I think that this woman is very talented and should be hired." Immediately after, many people voiced their agreement. Lord Fang stood in the crowd, feeling both proud and distressed. He was proud that his daughter was so outstanding, but distressed because his daughter had to face everything on this path. There were already so many objections before she even started. When his daughter really entered the imperial court, how much pressure and strange looks would she receive? Even though they felt that Fang Jiari's essay was excellent, some officials were still unwilling to accept a woman as an official. Lord Zhao was one of them. He secretly exchanged glances with a few people and stood out. "Your Majesty, I agree that this essay is excellent, but there is no precedent of a woman entering the imperial court as an official. I hope that Your Majesty will consider it carefully. I hope that Your Majesty will follow the precedent and consider this matter carefully." Not long after, a row of officials stood out. "Oh, then what do you think I should do?" Shang Junlin lowered his eyes, his voice unreadable. Lord Zhao said firmly, "I think that Your Majesty should reward her, but you should also warn the world that there will not be a next time." When Mushi heard this, her hands paused. "Young master, this Lord Zhao is too optimistic. What's the difference between doing this and directly destroying Miss Fang? He just wants to destroy Miss Fang. Look at what he said before. He thinks that women should be trapped in the harem and that women don't deserve the same treatment as men. Just wait and see, when Miss Fang enters the imperial court, the first person she will deal with will be him." It wasn't a bad thing to have ulterior motives. Everyone had ulterior motives. Being selfish was the worst thing that could happen. Da Huan didn't only belong to him. "Ha," Shang Junlin chuckled, "warning the world. Lord Zhao, tell me, what did Fang Jiari do that is against common decency and unforgivable to the point of warning the world?" "This." Lord Zhao hesitated. "She participated in the imperial examination as a woman." "Lord Zhao, as an important official of Da Huan, have you seriously read the laws of Da Huan?" Shang Junlin lifted his eyelids and looked at him emotionlessly. "Tell me, which law, which article states that women are not allowed to participate in the imperial examination?" Under the heavy pressure, Lord Zhao's legs went soft and he knelt on the ground. This official. Since Lord Zhao isn't clear, it's better for you to go back and familiarize yourself with the laws of Da Huan. There's no need to come to the imperial court before you can memorize everything." "Your Majesty." At this moment, Lord Zhao clearly realized that he had violated Shang Junlin's taboo. It was Shang Junlin's ambiguous attitude from the start of the imperial court that gave him the wrong impression. One wrong step would lead to many wrong steps. Yes, How could he forget what kind of personality Shang Junlin had? How could he allow others to jump on his head? Lord Zhao slumped to the ground and realized that he was drenched in cold sweat. After dealing with Lord Zhao cleanly, the remaining officials who wanted to object didn't dare to act rashly. His cold gaze swept around the room. The few officials who opposed him just now lowered their heads, afraid that they would be punished. Since you didn't violate the law, do as you should. Regardless of gender, you are all citizens of Da Huan. I don't want to hear people talk about gender in the future. All the officials became serious and said in unison, "This official obeys." After the imperial court, Shang Junlin saw Shen Yu, who had been waiting for a long time. He hugged her in his arms and said, "You must have waited for a long time. I let you sleep a bit more before coming. It's okay. It's interesting to listen to their quarrel." Shen Yu raised her head from the man's arms after listening to the officials' quarrel for the whole morning. Has this matter been dealt with? No one will make a fuss for the time being. When they are officially appointed, they will probably make a fuss again. Shang Junlin touched Shen Yu's hair on the back. As for the official position given to Fang Jiari, they will probably make a fuss. Your Majesty won't be afraid of them. Shen Yu blinked her eyes. Your Majesty was really amazing just now. Shang Junlin seemed to have thought of something. He paused and said, "You, tell me, how am I amazing?" Chapter 76. Which part of Your Majesty is not powerful? Shen Yu rolled his eyes. Your Majesty is naturally powerful in every aspect. Is that so? Shang Junlin held Shen Yu's waist with one hand and held his hand with the other. He played with it in his palm. Do you want to try? Try what? Shen Yu suddenly closed his mouth and reacted. Your Majesty, do you feel that you are different from before? How am I different? Shang Junlin thought about it seriously after hearing Shen Yu's words, but he didn't find anything wrong. Your Majesty didn't like to say this kind of thing before. Shen Yu narrowed his eyes. I didn't know how to say this before. Shang Junlin tightened his arms around Shen Yu's waist and leaned over to rub his cheek against Shen Yu. Does you like it? A layer of light pink appeared on Shen Yu's face. The man's body temperature was just like him, giving Shen Yu a fiery feeling. When their faces touched intimately, she could clearly feel the heat of another person. Shen Yu pursed her lips. Do Your Majesty's officials know that you have such a side to you? Why would I want them to know? It's enough for you to know. Shang Junlin tilted his head slightly and left a kiss on Shen Yu's face. Shen Yu curled his fingers and didn't avoid it. He let the kiss move downwards. After hugging Shen Yu for a while, Shang Junlin's anger from the morning court session was extinguished. He sat down with Shen Yu in his arms. You has been waiting for me for so long. Are you hungry? Shen Yu didn't feel it until Shang Junlin mentioned it. He nodded and said, a little. Meng Chang, serve the meal. Eunuch Meng went out. Mu Shi poured tea for the two masters and retreated to the side. Shen Yu held the teacup and gently rubbed the sides of the teacup. How does Your Majesty plan to deal with Mr. Zhao? Shang Junlin held Shen Yu's hand that was holding the teacup and took a sip. Does he really think that I won't dare to touch him just because he has an aristocratic family behind him? Your Majesty, that's my cup. You're not even willing to give me a sip of Yu's tea? Or is it that Yu dislikes me? Shang Junlin did not let go of the cup. Instead, he drank all the water in the cup. If Your Majesty wants to drink, of course you can. It's just a cup of water. Yu, don't be angry. Jin drank your cup, so Jin will compensate you with Jin's cup. How about it? Shang Junlin took the empty cup from Shen Yu's hand, picked up another full cup and fed it to Shen Yu. Yu feeds Jin once, Jin will feed Yu once. It seemed that he would not stop until Shen Yu drank. Shen Yu had no choice but to take a sip. He could see that Shang Junlin was doing it on purpose. Fortunately, Shang Junlin knew that he should not tease Shen Yu too much. After feeding him once, he returned to normal. The aristocratic families are getting more ambitious. Lord Zhao is just a stepping stone for them. If they can force His Majesty to take a step back this time, they will be able to push their luck the next time and gain more benefits for the aristocratic families. If they can't, it's fine to give up an imperial censor. It won't hurt their foundation. Shun Yu learned about Mr. Zhao's identity in the back hall. As an imperial censor, it was his duty to persuade the emperor. However, this did not mean that he could influence the emperor's thoughts because of his own selfish desires. Yu is right. The aristocratic families have been hovering in the imperial court for a long time. It is very difficult to shake their foundation. Shang Junlin lowered his eyes and hid the murderous intent in his eyes. From his ascension to the throne until now, the aristocratic families had made many obstacles for him. However, because the previous emperor was muddle-headed, most of the power in the imperial court fell into the hands of the aristocratic families. Although there was an imperial examination, the aristocratic families had more resources. Most of the officials selected from the imperial examination were also related to the aristocratic families. Shang Junlin spent several years to cultivate a group of officials who were not related to the aristocratic families. Shun Yu covered Shang Junlin's hand. Your Majesty, you don't have to endure for much longer. Aren't the results of the imperial examination slapping the aristocratic families in the face? None of the top 3 in the imperial examination came from an aristocratic family. Didn't they boast that they were rich and superior? How could they not be compared to Jiang Huiqing, who was born in a humble family, and Fang Jiari, who was a woman? Yu is right. No matter how deep their roots are in Da Huan, I will cut off those roots that suck the blood of Da Huan. Shang Junlin turned his hand and wrapped Shun Yu's hand in his palm. Their fingers intertwined and intertwined. As long as these people did not act too excessively, he used to turn a blind eye to them. However, now that he had Yu, in order to give Yu better protection, he would not allow any problems to happen to Da Huan. Not long after, Eunuch Meng brought the palace servants to put down the dishes sent by the imperial kitchen. Shun Yu took a look and saw that they were all his favorite dishes. Your Majesty, let's eat first. Okay. The two of them sat down and the palace servants retreated to the side. Shun Yu was not used to being served meals. Shang Junlin had been eating with him for a long time, so he gradually lost the habit of letting others serve him food. One was an emperor, and the other was a nobleman. These two people, who had noble statuses, ate like ordinary people. Eunuch Meng was an old man who had followed Shang Junlin for a long time. He saw with his own eyes that Shang Junlin had become more and more lively after Shun Yu entered the palace. He could not help but sigh in his heart. He had also imagined what it would be like if the emperor had someone in his imperial harem. No matter what, it would not be better than now. After the results of the court examination were out, the imperial court would send people to announce the results. At this time of the year, the people in the capital paid the most attention to the top 3. This year's results caused a lot of heated discussion. There was no other reason other than the fact that there was a woman on the list this time. Moreover, she came in second place. People's discussions about this matter could be heard everywhere in the restaurants and tea houses. A woman as an official? Isn't this a fantasy? How can a woman be an official? Compared to showing her face outside, it is better for her to stay at home and take care of her husband and children. What do you know? If she has this ability, why can't she serve the imperial court like a man? But did you notice that the noblemen who are more arrogant than the sky did not get any of the top 3? Isn't that right? Only the one who bragged about his genius persona got 4th place. If you ask me, the noblemen are too arrogant. They think that they can sit back and relax with a large number of secret manuals. They do not know that they will be left far behind by others if they work behind closed doors. A young man in white sitting not far away heard these words and his expression became very ugly. The people who were dressed like noblemen beside him looked at each other secretly and did not dare to speak. They had only pulled their good friend out to relax after seeing that his results were not ideal. They did not expect to hear such words. Brother Yi, it is true that I didn't do well in the exam. You don't have to say more. The young man in white took a sip of wine with an ugly expression. Have you investigated the identity of those people? It was fine that he was defeated by He Chengyu. Anyway, they were both noblemen. What about Jiang Huiqing and Fang Jiari? A person who came out of nowhere dared to climb over his head. Yes, Fang Jiari is the only daughter of Lord Fang. Jiang Huiqing is just an abandoned orphan with no background. Brother Jianming, do you need us to do something? The young man in white, Yi Jianming, shook his head and his eyes were gloomy. Don't act rashly. Don't think that your official career will be smooth after being in the top 3. The real difficulty is still to come. Do you really think it is so easy to be an official? It was easy to control a person without any power behind him. Brother Jianming, don't worry. Of these 2 people, one entered the official career as a woman, and the other was inextricably linked to the cheating case some time ago. It is still uncertain whether they can successfully enter the imperial court. Yi Jianming grabbed the hand of the person who spoke. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by inextricably linked to the cheating case? Oh, about that, Brother Jianming, you were focused on preparing for the exam and may have missed the news. It is said that Jiang Huiqing was also approached by those people before the exam. But who knows if he really did anything except himself? Yes. Yi Jianming smiled maliciously. How can a person without any support get such a good result if there is nothing fishy about it? Achoo! Jiang Huiqing, who was talking, suddenly sneezed. He touched his forehead. Did I catch a cold because the temperature dropped recently? It is also possible that someone is talking about you. He Chengyu slowly picked up a piece of food with his chopsticks and put it into his mouth. Brother Chengyu, don't make fun of me. If I am really being talked about, Brother Chengyu should be the same as me. Jiang Huiqing looked distressed at the mention of this matter. Because there was a top scholar and a third-place scholar, the Yingxing Tower's doorstep was almost broken by people. Just dealing with the people who came to congratulate him was already very tiring, not to mention the wave after wave of matchmakers who came to propose marriage. It was a tradition in Da Huan to find a son-in-law. He Chengyu and Jiang Huiqing were both dignified and had a clean family background. One was the top scholar, the other the third-place scholar, and neither of them was married. Countless families in the capital wanted to marry the 2 of them. Compared to He Chengyu, Jiang Huiqing's family background was a bit weaker. However, how many people who had thought of marriage would care about this? If one wanted a good family background, there were plenty of young masters from aristocratic families in the capital. Because of this, Jiang Huiqing's popularity had even surpassed He Chengyu's. At most, there were more than 20 matchmakers who came to him in one morning. Jiang Huiqing was so scared that he immediately closed the door and refused to see anyone. Seeing that he was really troubled, He Chengyu proposed to move out. Although the He family's headquarters were not in the capital, it was not difficult to get 1 or 2 houses. Jiang Huiqing thought about it and agreed. He decided to temporarily move out with He Chengyu. For some reason, he wrote a letter to Shenyu and told him what happened during this time. Shenyu finished reading Jiang Huiqing's letter and imagined the scene at that time. He couldn't help but laugh. He was scared by the enthusiasm of the people in the capital. I didn't expect that he would continue to write to you. Shang Junlin also finished reading the letter. There was a smile in his voice. I didn't expect it either. I thought that he would be scared by our true identity and not write to me for a while. Shenyu also didn't expect to receive the letter so quickly. The letter mentioned their new address. Isn't His Majesty going out of the palace in 2 days? Why don't we go and take a look? Shang Junlin wanted to see the results of the Ministry of Works. The prescription was proposed by Shenyu, so he naturally wanted to bring him along. Shang Junlin thought about it and agreed. He definitely didn't expect that we would go there. Shenyu winked slyly. Jiang Huiqing, who had finally moved to a new house without being disturbed, breathed a sigh of relief. He relaxed and rested for 2 days. At this moment, he didn't know that he would have a big surprise soon. Chapter 77. The Ministry of Works had been very busy recently. With the money and the cement recipe, they had finally caught the attention of the Emperor. They had to work hard to produce results. Since the Emperor had pointed out that the road needed to be repaired, the focus would naturally be on that road. After discussing with his subordinates, the Minister of Works decided to enclose that road and not announce it until there were results. This was a decision made after careful consideration. It was too easy to crack the cement recipe, and they still didn't know where His Majesty would eventually use it. To be safe, they would not let this thing leak out before they received His Majesty's explicit order. As the main sponsor, Yang Zheng only knew that the road was being repaired. He didn't know how the encircled road was being repaired. Since his goal had been achieved, he didn't care much about it. After a period of hurried work, that road was finally repaired. The Minister of Works stood in front of the flat road and sighed, "It's indeed much better than the previous one." The person in charge of repairing the road was also from the Ministry of Works. Seeing this, he walked over and said, "Sir, this kind of road can't absorb rainwater like the previous ones. If we want to build it on a large scale, there are still many problems to consider. I will submit a memorial to the Emperor. You have made a great contribution this time. I won't forget it. Thank you, sir." Fu Xin couldn't hide the joy in his eyes. He was originally an unremarkable minor official in the Ministry of Works. If he hadn't done some research on road construction and received the favor of the Minister of Works, he wouldn't have had the chance to make a name for himself. The Minister of Works patted his shoulder and said, "Work hard. The Emperor values the cement very much. As for the problem you mentioned just now, you have to think of a solution when you go back. In 2 days, the Emperor will personally come to see the results. Whether or not you can seize this opportunity depends on you." Fu Xin excitedly kowtowed to the Minister of Works and said, "Thank you, sir, for your support." He understood that this was an opportunity given to him by the Minister of Works. Otherwise, he could have just brushed over what he had done. The higher-ups would only care about the final results and wouldn't pay attention to him. Time passed in a flash. Soon, it was the day to leave the palace. This time, because they had to go to see the road paved by the Ministry of Works, Shen Yu and Shang Junlin did not disguise themselves. They just changed into casual clothes and sat in the carriage to leave the palace. Speaking of which, we have taken this path many times. Shen Yu lifted a corner of the carriage curtain and looked out. Who would have thought that the Emperor and I have left the palace the most often was to go to the secret prison? Take a you to other places in the future. Shang Junlin sat upright in the carriage, his eyes fixed on Shen Yu. "I'm just saying." Shen Yu put down the curtain and sat down beside Shang Junlin. "Your Majesty, will this road be completely rebuilt? If the Ministry of Works is successful, not only here, but also the entire capital. Not only the capital, but also the official roads in other places." The carriage moved very steadily. Shen Yu leaned on Shang Junlin's shoulder. "If Your Majesty wants to repair all the official roads in Dahuan, the horseshoes will also need to be improved. This kind of road is indeed very convenient, but it will damage the horseshoes if it is used too much." There were horseshoes in Dahuan. Shen Yu had read in a book that the damage caused to the horseshoes by cement roads was much greater than the roads they were using now. When the time comes, let the people from the Ministry of Works study it together. Shang Junlin was interested in the benefits that the road would bring after it was repaired. As for other things, they could find ways to solve them. The carriage moved for a while and stopped. The Minister of Works, who had already received the news, came forward with his people and saluted together. "Your Majesty, Your Majesty." Shang Junlin got off the carriage first, then helped Shen Yu down. "No need to be so polite. Just take me there." "Yes." The Minister of Works stepped forward and led the two of them to the place that was surrounded by people. Shang Junlin looked at the barrier that was taller than a person and smiled. "What are you doing with these? I was worried that there would be some blind people who would make trouble, so I simply surrounded this area." Shen Yu looked around curiously. There were people guarding every distance. It was obvious that the Minister of Works was very attentive to this place. "Your Majesty, don't worry. I had people put up a notice at the intersection and arranged for people to guard the intersection. I won't let the pedestrians walk for nothing." The Minister of Works explained carefully. "I saw it just now. You did a good job." Shang Junlin put one hand behind his back and the other hand holding Shen Yu as they walked forward. After bypassing the messy area, a straight road came into view. The greenish-grey road gave people a clean and flat feeling. Shang Junlin had seen the appearance of a cement road before, but he was still deeply shocked at this moment. Different from the road in Shunyu's manor, the road paved by the Ministry of Works was an entire road. The visual feeling was completely different from before. The people from the Ministry of Works brought a small carriage over. The Minister of Works walked to the side of the carriage and said, "Your Majesty, I have already asked people to test it. On the same road, the carriage will not only shorten the time it takes to travel on the cement road, but it will also greatly reduce the bumps. Does you want to try it?" Shang Junlin turned his head and asked in a low voice. Shunyu nodded. The two of them got on the carriage. The driver was changed to the person brought by Shang Junlin. The carriage moved forward without the bumps from before. The carriage drove one round and returned to the original road. Shang Junlin did not say anything, but the expression on his face showed that he was very satisfied with this road. "Your Majesty, I have another thing to report." The Minister of Works called the man who was waiting at the side. "This is the person who has the most credit for paving the road. His name is Fu Xin." Fu Xin never expected that the Minister of Works would directly introduce him in front of the Emperor. He trembled and saluted, "Your humble servant greets Your Majesty and Your Highness." "Fu Xin, right? You have done well this time. Reward." The final result was better than expected. Shang Junlin was very happy. "Fu Xin, your humble servant thanks Your Majesty for your grace. Shang Junlin, in the future, you will be responsible for the roads in other places. If you lack anything, just tell the Minister of Works." Fu Xin, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Fu Xin did not expect to be directly entrusted with such an important task. He was excited, but there was a faint uneasiness in his heart. He was just an ordinary person. Could he really fulfill the expectations of the Emperor? "Your Majesty, I have another thing to say." Fu Xin thought of the important matter and quickly said, "It is about the problem of water accumulation. This new road cannot absorb the rainwater that falls to the ground. If we want to pave a large area of this road in the city, we need to replan the problem of water accumulation in the capital." Shunyu did not expect that someone had already realized this point. He asked with interest, "Since you have brought it up, do you have any good ideas to solve this problem?" "In reply to Your Highness, I do have some ideas. However, whether they can be implemented or not, I have to test them before I know," Fu Xin replied. "If this matter is given to you, do you have the confidence to do it well?" Shunyu liked Fu Xin's serious attitude. "I do not dare to guarantee, but I will do my best to do it," Fu Xin replied firmly. "Very good. I have some small suggestions here. When the time comes, I can give you a reference. As for how to do it, you can discuss it with the people of the Ministry of Works. There is also the matter of the horseshoes," Shang Junlin added. "You should have noticed that this kind of road causes more wear and tear on the horseshoes." The people of the Ministry of Works had noticed it. However, because the horses did not run back and forth many times, they did not take it seriously. Only when the Emperor brought it up did they become serious. "It is my negligence. I will have people study it." The Minister of Works bowed his head. "The use of cement is far more than this. You can expand your imagination and see if there are other places where it can be used." "Yes." After explaining the matters here, Shang Junlin left with Shunyu. "Her Majesty is not as scary as we thought," someone in the crowd said in a low voice. "Her Majesty is not a scourge. Of course, she is not scary." The Minister of Works glanced at the person who spoke and secretly said, "You have not seen Her Majesty when Gui Jun is not here. She is like a different person today. Gui Jun is also different from the rumors. He is handsome and elegant. Obviously, he is a good match for Her Majesty. Moreover, Gui Jun knows a lot. He has considered what we did not consider. Unlike the rumors, be careful with your words." The Minister of Works frowned and interrupted the discussion. "Do not talk about this matter. Go back to work." Although the discussion was interrupted, the image of Shunyu and Shang Junlin had changed in the eyes of the people. In the past, he had not met them and could only know them from the mouths of others. Now that he met them, he knew that there was a big difference between the rumors and the truth. Shunyu sat in the carriage and recalled the events of his previous life. In his previous life, Shen Qingran also took out cement. However, this thing was firmly in the hands of the King of Yu. It brought him huge profits, but it was not really used to benefit the people. Shen Qingran knew a lot of things. In the palace, there was also Shen Yu. These two people came from the same place. Perhaps he could ask more things that would be beneficial to the development of Dahuan. What is Yu thinking about? Seeing that Shen Yu had not spoken since he got on the carriage, Shang Junlin pinched the soft flesh on his face. Shen Yu was already used to being pinched by him from time to time. His thoughts returned and he said, I am thinking about Shen Qingran. That brother of yours. What is there to think about? Shang Junlin did not have a good impression of Shen Qingran. Shen Yu was silent for a moment and said, Actually, the reason I know about cement is also related to Shen Qingran. Does your Majesty know what he said in the letter he wrote to the King of Yu? Although he did not know why Shen Yu suddenly asked this question, Shang Junlin still replied, Why would I read his letter? That letter was kept by the King of Yu. If a Yu wants to know, I can send the hidden dragon guards to investigate. Your Majesty, after we return to the palace, I want to see Shen Yu. If you want to see her, just ask her to come to Yuzhong Palace to see you. What is wrong with you today? You have not thought of her since just now. I thought of something. Shen Yu shook his head and threw his chaotic thoughts to the back of his mind. Your Majesty, are we arriving soon? If Shen Yu did not want to say, Shang Junlin would not force him. Yes, we will arrive soon. Jiang Huiqing was moving his books to the courtyard to bask in the sun when he saw a carriage coming from afar. He shouted into the house, Brother Chengyu, do you have a friend coming today? No, Chengyu's voice came from the house. What's wrong? There is a carriage coming this way. Jiang Huiqing scratched his face. They are not here to look for us, right? As soon as he finished speaking, the carriage began to slow down and finally stopped at the entrance of the courtyard. Who is it? No one said they were coming today. Jiang Huiqing was full of questions. Brother Chengyu, come and see if you know them. Seeing two familiar figures getting off the carriage and walking towards them, Jiang Huiqing opened his eyes wide and the rest of his words were stuck in his throat. Why did His Majesty and Gui Jun come here without saying anything? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.